Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Apparently, StreamYard is acting a bit crazy this morning. I hope you guys are doing all right. Welcome to the best damn morning show that you are going to find pretty much anywhere on the web, covering news, politics, opinion, all of that good stuff. I am glad that you guys can join me. I hope you guys are doing all right. I want to send a shout out to the chat, the people here early, even before I got here. Shout out to all of you, Wraith, Mama Thomas. Who else is here? Well, we have a good crowd. What is this? Darth X, etc. Jinho Choi, welcome to the show. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm trying to make sure that the mic and everything else is good. By the way, thank you for your comments. I read the comments on the videos. If it's something that I think I got wrong, I try to self-correct. Some I appreciate, some I disagree with. I will say this. There's a misconception among, I think, some people who watch the show. I consider this a conversation. I don't consider this guest talks for 30 minutes. Now, there are some shows that do that, where the host never contradicts the guest. The guest says whatever, and the host nods, and they move on. This is not that show. So you will be deeply disappointed if that is what you're looking for. I do need to up my production value. That I agree with. That I do agree with. That's all I have to say about that. As for, I want to give a shout out to Canadian preppers. I should have did this in the previous video. Thank you for the invite. I got to be honest, I didn't know what I was going into. I looked at some of the episodes before going in, but many of them were prepping stuff. And so I wasn't quite sure the point of view of the channel. Because look, you're going to hostile territory. You have no idea. Like, each channel is a world unto itself. They have their own takes, their own points of view. But the host was fantastic. I had a great time. We covered pretty much everything. Definitely check the video out if you get the chance. There are going to be people who vehemently disagree with me. Fair enough. I know if you're giving an opinion, somebody's going to have a contrary opinion. That's just life. There are going to be people who downvote that video. Fair enough. Probably a lot of them. But again, that's not my world, right? So I accept that. There were a lot of people, though, that did appreciate the point of view. And I appreciate being on the show in earnest. And we'll go back anytime to have any conversation you want. So I want to thank him for the invite. It was gracious. I rarely get invites to shows because usually I'm the one that's bringing on guests. So it's kind of an interesting experience to be on the other side. I also understand how there's certain guests that come on the show that I'm doing interviews with, in which case I want to hear them talk because I'm trying to learn. There's some guests I want to have conversations with because I'm trying to pull something out of them, if that makes sense. Like, I have a point of view and I want to push that point of view against theirs in order to try to get a better take overall. If I'm talking about a topic, it's because I care about it and I'm interested in it. So it's not this dispassionate distance of say whatever you want and we move. It's not that. It's not that. Different show. If you have a lot that you're trying to pack in, it is understandable why sometimes people go long in regardless of what you're trying to say. And I realized that as I'm on that show having the conversation, there's some people really good, like Dane McAdams. He says it stops. That is hard to do when you're trying to give like a contextual point of view. I appreciate the invite though, and I hope he has me back at some point. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of news. There's a lot of news. And we have a full show for you today because there was a lot to get to. And fortunately, I was able to get the guests that I wanted. Arno, he's going to be on the show this morning, 7:15. John Kiriakou, he's going to be on the show talking about Iran and items pertaining to that. Dan Kovalik, he's going to be on talking about, there was a fascinating clip. What time is it? What time? Okay, we have time. There was a fascinating clip of Mahmoud Abbas where he is losing it at Hamas, effectively saying, you're getting at people killed, you sons of dogs, I suppose that's sons of bitches. Effectively saying, let the hostages go, give us, the Palestinian Authority, your weapons. I mean, look, man, the rub is the Palestinian Authority has no authority. It's not like they were elected anytime recently. And from my understanding, they are like the Jews that were helping the Nazis. So this notion of give up any notion of resistance, help us be collaborators, I don't know if that's necessarily going to fly. By the same token, there is a contradiction in resistance. Dan Kovalik and I were talking about this last night. Like, you take an act to push back on an oppressor that has been oppressing, killing, raping, etc. for decades. That oppressor has the force disparity advantage and leverage that to kill as many of you as possible. Who's at fault? Now, obviously, the person who's doing it is at fault because they are the ones that are oppressing, and they're ones that created the resistance movement in the first place. By the same token, the resistance movement is stuck with the idea that it was something they did that caused the pushback. It is a contradiction, and I don't know the way out that box. Putting weapons down seems to not work because at the point you're just giving up. But resisting, if you don't have the ability to have a plan to get something out of it, also doesn't seem to work. It's a contradiction. Dan is going to be on. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Mahmoud Abbas. There was also the story that was being floated. Haaretz covered it. It was on Reddit. Somebody else came up with it about an offer of $5,000. If you go and live in France, you get a job and all this other stuff. Israel's like, we have no idea where that comes from. It obviously came from Israel. And Hamas is like, look, they're trying to destabilize resistance or something to that effect. We're going to talk about that also. We have also Ken McCarthy. This should be a very interesting interview. Ken McCarthy wrote the book on JFK's and RFK's fight against extreme Zionism, especially with the release of the JFK files. That should be a very interesting interview. So like I said, we have a full show, and I appreciate all of you being here. It should be a good one. There is a lot of news, especially on the front. And part of the reason I was so interested in bringing in Arno, Trump is tearing into Zelensky. In fact, it's not just Trump. That's the reason why I had the name of the White House. It is the entire White House that is tearing into Zelensky. And they're tearing into him saying, you are sabotaging our peace deal. We are trying to get a deal. You have no cards. And they're saying something else. They're saying the quiet part out loud that they would never say before. For the longest time, the argument has been, this is a stalemate. This is a stalemate. This is clearly a stalemate. That is no longer the argument. I want you to hear Rubio and what Rubio has to say about this. And by the way, this is echoed by Trump. So it's not just Rubio that is saying this. Listen to what he said, the very particular line towards the end
so far apart
of Rubio's statement. Listen to what he says.
This is a terrible war and it needs to end. Because it has no military solution. There is no military solution to this war. We have to be frank. You know, Russia's not just going to roll over Ukraine and take the whole country, and Ukraine's not going to push them all the way back to where they were before 2014. So what I would say we're involved in is understanding what is the Russian position. We have a better understanding of that now because we've actually spoken to them after 3 years of not speaking to them. What is the Ukrainian position? And figure out, are these guys even in the same neighborhood? Because if they're in completely different zip codes, then we may have to conclude that they're so far apart that peace is impossible at this time. We've done our best. We've put a lot of time and energy at the highest levels of our government. We'll continue to be willing to do so as long as there's a realistic path forward. If at some point we determine that we're just too far apart and not enough movement is happening, we may need to move on to other priorities because there are a lot of important things happening in the world. This is not our war. We didn't start this war. We're trying to help everybody end it.
Okay, I must have totally misheard Rubio in the first time I listened to this clip. I would say this, though. We didn't start this war. It's nonsense. Nonsense. Now, if Rubio is talking specifically about the Trump administration, Trump brags about giving javelins the sanctions that were put on Russia, all that stuff. We did start this war. I want to play another clip, though. Let's go to Trump, because Trump makes the point that I thought Rubio was making in that clip. Trump says the quiet part out loud. Trump says the quiet part out loud. Ukrainian President Zelensky is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that, quote, Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about here. The statement is very harmful to peace negotiations with Russia, that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama. Notice he put Hussein in there. And it's not even a point of discussion. Nobody is asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. But if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? Put a pin in that for a moment, because I want to come back to that. The area also houses many people years before Obama handover. I want to go to the bottom. He has nothing to boast about. The situation for Ukraine is dire. He can have peace, or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. The quiet part out loud. Meaning this notion that it's a stalemate. This idea that these guys are, there's no military solution. There's a military solution. They'll lose the whole country. That's the military solution. So I could have swore I heard Rubio said something similar to that effect. And maybe I just misheard Rubio. Perhaps it was a different clip. But whatever. They're now saying the quiet part aloud. You will lose your entire country if you continue to fight this war. Arestovich, by the way, says something very similar, where he points out right now it's 4 regions. Later, it's going to be 6. And after that, it's going to be 8. And just in case you don't know who Arestovich is, Arestovich was Zelensky's spin doctor. He was his propaganda minister. You can read it below, but you're not going to be able to.
Что мы должны отдавать? 4 области. По одной простой причине, потому что через полгода или год будете отдавать 6. Не хватит ума, 8 будете отдавать.
Effectively, the guy asks him, like, look, why should we give up anything? And Arestovich tells him, right now it's 4. In a few months, it's going to be 6. And then it's going to be 8. Is that reason enough for you? Meaning, you're going to lose more and more because we can't do anything to stop it. Trump is saying, you can't do anything to stop it. You're going to lose your entire country. Rubio is saying, there's no military solution. Well, your boss disagrees with you on that, if that is indeed Rubio's take. This is fascinating. They've gone from it's a stalemate. Nobody is making progress to you're going to lose it all. Better make the deal. You're going to lose it all. You better make the deal. Now, whether that's 6 months before they collapse, whether that's 8 months, whether that's a year, they will collapse. The threats that are being leveled, by the way, of we will walk, it's not aimed at Russia. Trump's not aiming that at Russia. Vance is not aiming that at Russia. Rubio's not aiming that at Russia. He's aiming that at Ukraine and Zelensky. Now, I've showed you the clip in the past where Zelensky came out and effectively said, we're not giving up Crimea and we're not acknowledging those territories. That is fake news. That is not something that we're prepared to do, which directly contradicts Trump, Vance, Rubio, and even the press secretary who was out hammering Zelensky herself. That's fascinating. That is fascinating. And so Trump wants a deal. He is focusing on Zelensky, his proxy, as Rubio has called him in the past, to get that deal. And yet his proxy has effectively gone rogue. It's gone rogue. I'm going to have to do something. Give me 1 second on something. And I hope it doesn't screw up the stream. Okay, good. It didn't screw up the screen. I thought it was going to mess things up. Yeah, so that is where we are in regards to the negotiations from the Ukrainian side. Meaning, when the U.S. is looking at Ukraine, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. There's a glitch on my computer that I need to fix. That is how they're looking at it from the Ukrainian side. Zelensky is sabotaging our peace deal. And we don't like him doing that. So the entire White House is out on attack, going after Zelensky to resolve that particular issue. On the Russian side, Vance has made this comment that has been interpreted, what the hell, there we are, that has been interpreted as an ultimatum, because he effectively said, look, either you guys accept the deal or not. You have to do something. Russia has also pointed out, don't believe the media that you may see. Trust other sources, basically sources closer to the material conditions. They have pointed out, Peskov has come out and said, we appreciate the movement of the president. We don't accept this as an ultimatum. We believe this is a negotiation that will take time, and we're willing to engage in that negotiation. Putin has come out saying, I am willing to have bilateral talks, providing certain conditions are met. Of course, we can't have those talks because it's illegal by Ukrainian law, which he's right. They passed a decree saying you can't have talks with Russia while Putin is in office. So there's a charm offensive that is taking place. My guest is here, and I really want to have a conversation with him on this. I am fascinated by what is taking place. We are joined with Arno Delet. Arno, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing okay?
Hello, Jamal. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am intrigued by the news that is coming out. Let me give you your byline. Arno Delet, he is an author, political analyst, international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of the American Political Consensus. I've given somewhat of a context to the audience already, so I don't need to retread. Donald Trump is bashing the hell out of Zelensky. I mean, battering him. He came out with this tweet recently. I showed the audience already. I will present it to you just so it's in the video when I cut this, where he is effectively saying, look, you're boasting on the pages of the Wall Street Journal. You have no cards in this. You didn't fire a shot to defend Crimea, and now you're taking this umbrage with this issue. And he even points out, you're going to lose your entire country in 3 years if you keep this up. Now, I think 3 years is a little bit inflated, but okay, whatever. You're going to lose your entire country if you keep this up. How are you really acting like this with the deal? Now, the entire White House is doing this. Rubio has been out also on this front, bashing him. The press secretary has been out bashing Zelensky. And what I find interesting is this is not really aimed at Russia. Give me your take on this. I mean, Moscow has put out conditions that are red lines in the way that they've described it. Make sure I'm straight. Yeah, have put out what they consider to be red lines. The four territories plus Crimea are part of the Russian Federation. That is not going to change. We don't care what happens. That is not going to change. No NATO, and to be able to enshrine that in some kind of reality where they can believe it. Trump is not there. But they're still putting out this as if it's an ultimatum. And like I said, going after Zelensky on this. Give me a take on this. I mean, is Russia willing to budge on those red lines? Do they know something in the Trump administration that I don't?
No, you summed it up pretty well. Russia's red lines have been known for a long time, and they've remained unchanged. You know, as you mentioned, the 4 new oblasts from formerly known as East Ukraine, plus Crimea, which has voted to rejoin Russia over a decade ago, which, as you mentioned, makes no sense for Zelensky to now raise as a sticking issue bearing on any kind of peace talks. No, what I think is going on, and it's a recurring theme, is someone who basically wants the gravy train to continue. That's as far as he's personally concerned. That he knows that the curtain is coming down very soon, and he wants to somehow extend his shelf life. The other thing is that the Europeans need to maintain the illusion of a Russian boogeyman for reasons that are completely, wholly unrelated to the conflict per se, but more bearing on trying to salvage this political project called the European Union, and as such, basically provide their paymaster with the savings of all the people living therein. There's also an interesting statement made by former Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, bearing on who's not somebody off the street, as you might imagine, who basically said that in as far as the West is concerned, and more specifically, he pointed out to the European Union, they are looking to engage in a frontal conflict with Russia, according to him, within the next 3 to 5 years. So it's actually all coherent. If we were to have something, let's say, even something akin to Minsk 3, this would deflate the drive for Europe, which is aimed at, so some would say, picking the pockets of their citizens. Others would say, to retool the military capability of the Union. But in any event, to the extent there are globalists still acting behind the scene, and that Brussels, for a lack of a better place, is now de facto by default their headquarters, it makes perfect sense. Russia, as on an ideological point of view, as far as the globalists are concerned, is the boogeyman. I mean, it represents everything that they want to eradicate: traditional value, large families, verticality of the state, self-awareness of one's own cultural, religious roots, and it happens to also, for lack of a better word, occupy, quote unquote, 1/6 of the world landmass with everything in terms of natural resources that's in it, and that those globalists are dying to get their hands on, their grubby hands on. So I think you have to take into account this whole panopticon to try to somehow begin to understand why Zelensky feels confident enough that he can defy the Trump administration. Because obviously, if we're just looking at this, in the wake of what happened last February in the Oval Office, it makes no sense for him now to come up with yet another impediment to what makes perfect sense if you are really honest and real as far as stopping the violence and putting an end to a conflict which militarily is lost. He himself acknowledged that much last week. He was giving an interview when he said, we ain't got what it takes to reclaim those territories. So why are we still fighting? And why are you still violating every moratorium and or ceasefire whenever those come to be? It's an extension.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's an
No,
extension,
I'm
he's trying to basically play increments per increments, 3 months at a time, the required time, hoping again that as far as the economic front is concerned, for the Trump administration, things will get so bad that the midterm elections in 2026 will basically turn the tendency around. That's the calculus. You have to put ourselves in the head of the simpletons that are placed in the European Union key positions, in as far as their view of the world, their political incompetence, their illegitimacy, because none of those people were elected, and their propensity to think as the former Soviet Politburo used to think like, which is, when something doesn't work, you want to get more of it.
Yeah.
Those people are incapable of looking at themselves in the mirror and act, with introspection. In other words, their line is the line. That's it. And if it hasn't worked up to that point, it's because we haven't done enough of it. That's my understanding of the whole thing. So something's got to give at some point. Now, it's interesting to note that Russia said, well, we're not basically calling for the Zelensky regime to be gone. Well, I mean, come on, you know very well that there's no way you can sign any kind of memorandum of understanding, not to speak of a full-fledged peace treaty, with as long as you got this person who's legally illegitimate in place. So I didn't quite understand why Peskov said that in his own interview. But save for that, again, Russia's positions are known. They've been really clear, and they haven't deviated an iota. There were even, to the extent there might have been some wriggling room, there was talk about freezing, and that's when Witkoff met with Putin last time in St. Petersburg. They discussed yet the possibility to be discussed of freezing the conflict at the current situation. But I guess this would be, as far as the Russian Federation is willing to go, and I doubt personally that it would politically be viable as far as Russian public opinion is concerned. But those might be just elements of language to try to provide a dynamic leading to an appeasement, leading to winding down the rhetoric and making it possible for people to start sitting around a table and talk. That's really where we are right now, which is basically, we haven't moved much. To the extent there might have been discussions going back and forth, to the extent the Trump administration, owing to Witkoff being somewhat someone who understands things outside of the ideological bent of the Beltway, he was able to faithfully bring back to Trump, what the Russian position is about. But that's about it right now.
I need to see what Trump comes up with. Now, I will tell you, if I'm a sociopath, I had a conversation with Brian Berlett. He's from the New Atlas, fantastic show. And Brian pointed out that effectively all of this is playbook. Like all of this is war planning. That the US ultimately wants to deal with China. And they want Europe to basically feed the Europeans to the Russians in order to damage both, with the idea of maintaining a certain amount of primacy around the globe. And you can kind of see it, right? Like for example, this is Hegseth. Hegseth gave the speech, I think this was last year, but this is recently, where he's talking to Europe directly. I don't think he's in Europe, but he's talking effectively to Europe about NATO, saying, we want to maintain NATO. We just don't want to be part of it. We want you to do this. And as you pointed out, Shoigu is saying Europe is preparing for war in 3 to 5 years. It looks like they are. The jingoistic rhetoric, the things that they're saying, the things, we need to increase our war production. We need to do all of this stuff. Effectively, the Russians scared the hell out of them by beating the hell out of Ukraine. Listen to what he says.
America first doesn't mean America alone. It means we expect our allies to step up, to be true force multipliers for freedom. This approach ensures we achieve peace through strength. The time of the United States, here in Pennsylvania, here in our country, being the sole guarantor of European security has passed. It's long overdue. Europe has to step up military and lead.
This is, effectively, we're not getting rid of NATO. We want you to do NATO. We want you to build up your militaries. We want you to do all of this stuff. What do you think about that? I heard the speech by Putin. Well, it wasn't a speech. He was talking to, war planners. And he was pointing out they're looking at what we're doing. We're a step ahead of what they are. Effectively, we freaked them out. And we need to understand what's going to be the battle plan of the future. I would imagine Putin knows that Europe is gearing up for war. What do you think about that? That thought that the US is not exactly pulling out. They're more so pushing Europe into a larger conflict with Russia.
Well, of course, it's a possibility. And again, if you take into account Shoigu's statement on this overall issue, it would make sense that they would somehow assign tasks within NATO. Europe would be entrusted to somehow, if not conquer Russia and dismantle it, which is again ultimately what the game plan is about, at least contain it to the extent there's anything to contain, which is again it's a nonsensical issue. Russia has no. This is not the Soviet Union. They have no plans on ideologically subverting anybody. They are content within their natural historical space. So as a result, to the extent, they are now more confident, I think, that they've ever been, arguably, in their entire history. I'm talking about Russia. Whereas Europe is under this current construct, which does not reflect its organic history
or reality.
and our reality and the diversity of its cultures and contribution to world civilization. We have a European Union which is somehow we've talked about the reversal of poles. Everything that was up is now down and vice versa. I think short term, there's also the idea that to the extent Europe is expected to step it up and upgrade, they're going to do it with what, by and large, with American equipment. So we could look at it also first and foremost as an attempt to satisfy the U.S. military industrial complex, because all those weapon systems have to be compatible within NATO. You cannot, as we've seen with when Turkey attempted and did acquire those S-400, Washington was extremely annoyed. Not that much because of the acquisition of the system, but because it makes no sense within pre-existing weapon systems as they are interacting with each other and can be somehow put together to produce a synergy, right, on the battlefield. But and the idea is, and we've seen it, we've seen that, for instance, when Poland, they contribute, let's say, a quarter of what they get back from Brussels in terms of European funding, and we don't hear about putting together a European weapon or defense manufacturing sector. It's not about sovereignty. So that makes kind of no sense, because it contradicts, in a way, what J.D. Vance said in Munich last time, when he said you just have to focus on yourself and you have to regain your sovereignty, and you have to instead of engaging into ideology and creating monsters, foreign monsters, as Washington was fond of saying, to go outside looking for monsters to destroy, right? But in reality, you are imposing onto Europe, or should I say, you are depriving Europe of its own tools required to satisfy this thirst for power projection. Otherwise, I mean, if you have to, basically rely on spare parts or a weapon system per se from the US to operate and defend, what you're supposed to be all about, then what is this, speech, this kind of retooling, this reset of what Europe should be doing in those far as expressing or reflecting or implementing its own citizens' needs? And I'm not even going to talk about the fact that Europe right now is a desindustrialized husk. It does not have any need to create military sectors of any kind. It needs to start investing massively in R&D and create the jobs of tomorrow, and start trying to catch up with the gap, that the ever widening gap between it and digital high-tech superpowers like China.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
agreed.
So we have to be very cautious about, also this kind of like, MAGA is back, and that's going to somehow influence Europe in a beneficial way. You have to parse through the discourse and look how it computes on the ground. And to me, it doesn't connect at all.
Yeah.
This also could be a way for the Trump administration to handle semantics so as to lure their own ideological enemies in the US, now in Brussels, i.e. the globalist, in telling them, making them believe that somehow we are still on the, with you on the program, that at some point down the road, China and Russia have to be dealt with. But at this point, I think it's difficult to say. I think it's speculative, but since right now we're in a transition period, not only within the Euro-Atlantic relation, but also at the global level, with transfers of the center of gravity of what the German used to call the Weltanschauung, the spirit of the world. It's literally moving, as we speak. We can witness it day by day now. The short-lived tariff war exposed how much, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since the emergence of the unipolar moment, and it's a lot of things could happen either way, predicated on so many micro events, regional events, personality-based events, political personnel in some key countries, and it's so everything is really at this point so unstable, so chaotic, but this again, if anything, reflects on the emergence of a new distribution of power. And this is basically what we should try to extract out of all those events. There is definitely a redistribution of powers, and as in any redistribution of powers, we're going to have winners and losers. And right now, there's a lot of psyops, a lot of semantics being used left and right that seem to be evolving depending on one file to the next file, sometimes within days, coming from even areas where we would expect an ideological cohesion. So this is where we are right now. It's a fascinating time in the sense that we know that there's this elephant in the room, that the industrial output, the demographics, the natural resources are definitely now identified as within this emerging construct called BRICS, which, no fault of itself, is not trying to impose itself, but is acting as a reaction of abuses for the last 30 years. And even though it somewhat, surmises to the West in general and to the United States in particular, you could be part of the BRICS if you wanted to. We are open to anybody. And no, we don't want to get rid of the dollar. It's never been our intention to do so. But you've been sanctioning us using the dollar as a weapon for as far as the eye can see. So what are we supposed to do? Keep taking it? No. So, but this is where we are right now. And it's also a change. It's almost like someone who's been drunk on sugar-based, product. It's just, you have to somehow help them to get rid of the habit, kick the habit.
Yeah.
And we're a long way from that, unfortunately. And so it's, sometimes you have relapses. And this is what we see sometimes seemingly emanating even from the United States under the MAGA, movement era, I would say.
I'm curious. Do you think so? There was a large missile launch that hit all across Ukraine yesterday. It hit Kiev in and of itself, hitting administrative buildings, I guess, associated with the war, hit certain factories that were associated with the war, but it was massive, to put it mildly. There's also word that Russia is going on an offensive, if they're not already on an offensive. It seems that Ukraine is having a difficult time replacing its manpower. Is the thought that we can have a conversation, and as we have a conversation, the military is going to make certain gains, and we will get to a point where we will be content in order to make a deal. Now, of course, there's issues with how do you ensure that Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO like 5 years later down the line. How do you ensure that they don't fill Ukraine up full of weapons, meaning any kind of quote unquote security guarantees that are effectively delivered? Like all of that stuff is going to be potentially red lines. But you get the sense that there is a point where Putin is saying, okay, fair enough, we'll stop here. Let's make a deal. And from his point of view, we're moving on the battlefield and we're getting to that point quickly where we were willing to call it a day, even if it's not the entirety of Zaporozhye or the entirety of Kharkov, for example. Or is it everything? Meaning, is there any wiggle room in that red line that you're aware of?
Well, as I said earlier, I have my own reservation about somehow allowing Kiev, or what's left of it, to the extent we have demilitarized and denazified, because that's another issue here.
Right.
Significant portions in as far as at least Zaporozhye and Kherson are concerned, if not, Donetsk Republic, or what used to be known as the DPR, as far as its viability when then Putin has to sell this to its own constituency. That's they are historical administrative boundaries. So this would require obviously a tinkering of the administrative borders of those formerly known Ukrainian Eastern Oblast. I guess with some kind of education, trying to stress that by and large, the overwhelming amount of people who voted in favor of rejoining the Russian Federation are their security is guaranteed, even under the revised administrative borders of those regions. Yes, I think there with the proper massaging of the message and educating the people, and yes, because it's all about how it is. Something that looks outlandish initially can be sold, wholeheartedly, with the proper, media shepherding.
Messaging, messaging.
Yeah. So, but now to come back to your allusion to last night's attacks, actually, it's almost as if it coincided precisely with Trump's publishing of his own truth media communique on the lack of an outcome in London. Is that the implicit arrangement, it would appear to me anyway, I'm not obviously in the confidence of what's being discussed between Witkoff by and large and the Kremlin, but the idea is, okay, we'll try to synchronize our message in as far as our diplomatic pressure on Zelensky, but not only Zelensky, also the Europeans, and in as far as you being given carte blanche to essentially show that militarily, if we don't get to a deal right now, it's going to be what Arestovich said a couple of days ago on X. If you're stupid, it's not 4 regions you're going to lose, it's 6. And if you show yourself to be stupider than that yet, it's 8, or the whole thing. And that pretty much, connects with Trump's elements of language in his post. Is that, you're going to lose the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we're not going to blame the Russians for what the Russians are known to do. This is what they're doing. Yeah, exactly. That's the one.
Yeah. He said, why give away 4? And he said, because later it's going to be 6 and then 8. And to your point about Trump came out with his posts effectively saying, you're going to lose the entirety of the country if you keep this
That's
up.
right.
And yet
right.
he keeps going. And yet he keeps going. I mean,
but he has no choice. I guess he's prisoner of his own narrative. He has to somehow keep playing the role. He has to stay the course, as it were, even though on the ground it makes no sense whatsoever. He has no choice. It's typical tragedy of an actor who's known for this one role and who, the show is over, man. We've gone to post-production, the movie's about to be released and the guy is still playing, he can't get out of the role. And this is the role of his life in a way. I mean, I'm being facetious.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but you got a point. But it makes a point, right? It does make a point.
That's what defines him. And to the extent, he has other type of addictions, I think this addiction to being, we called him the Churchill of the 21st century. I mean, the guy was writing, large, living large. With, his face on Time magazine, and I think he might have just bought the farm or drank his own Kool-Aid. He's into it. So, why should he stop? And the Europeans, again, they need this. They need to keep this dead horse, alive, notwithstanding, the continuing massacre of Ukrainians for no objectively sensical military reason. It makes no sense.
Well, wait a minute. But see, things that don't make sense have to make sense in some frame of reference. Like, sure. What is... I had a Ukrainian diplomat on the show, I think it was a few days ago, and he said Europe wants to effectively force Russia to take all of Ukraine and then have a guerrilla war after the fact. And, talking to Mark's thing is, in the beginning, Mark was like, well, we just need to take certain territories and we can stop. And it's like, okay, well, how do you stop? And now Mark is like, we need to take it all. There should be no gray space. There should be nothing that allows another buildup. Because I am stuck on something on this. France and the UK say, look, we're willing to accept to give up the Crimea if we can have security guarantees. Well, again, these are red lines. Like all of these things are red lines from the Russian point of view. Well, no, you're not going to have troops in Ukraine. Full stop. Ukraine is going to be neutral, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't see how the gap is mended with Russia. Like, I get how you get your proxy on board, right? If we walk, you're by yourself, you're going to lose it all. I get that. I don't get how you mind the gap where Trump is and what he is saying versus what Russia is saying that are red lines. And as you pointed out, these are not things Putin, in American context, Putin is God-man of the world. They act like Putin is everywhere. But in that context, they do believe that he is the only person in Russia, as if he doesn't have a constituency that he has to attend to, that he has hardliners, that he has to pay attention to, that he has a public that he has to pay attention to.
That's a good point.
After telling that public for a long time, these are red lines. And it's very difficult to budge on those red lines. As you say, you can fudge it with messaging, but ultimately, this notion of troops in the area is probably going to be a no. This notion of,
especially if they are being used as triggers for that future conflict, which Shoigu alludes to.
Exactly.
Because that most likely would be their role, their fate, that they would be acting as a tripwire. They might be like, as the people behind the Ukraine project are wont of doing, a false flag attack, and will be blamed on Russia. And they will be able to say, this time it's all about, preserving democracy or whatever. It's
exactly
us or them.
So I don't see how they get to the deal on this. Like, there seems to be a gap on the Russian side of this. That seems, I don't know how you mind the gap. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting this wrong.
No, you're perfectly right. I think personally, one of the way that the gap could be mended is if other international powers were to be invited, people who we know they have no bones in this whole thing, i.e. South Africa, who actually was receiving Zelenskyy this past couple of days until last night's campaign. China obviously could play a big role. They would be able to provide the concrete instruments, mechanism, which would assuage Russia's objections as having, European NATO land troops in Ukraine, and they could be somehow, guarantor of a peace accord. So instead of having this kind of very tense, emotionally charged, confined set of players trying to basically almost like overnight bury all the resentment of the last 3 years, if not the last 10 years, why don't we organize an all-encompassing large international conference? We can, incorporating all the other BRICS members, or at least a significant amount of them, and go from there. Go from there, having those powers, some of them be guarantors, so that their evaluation of any future conditions or evolution of the situation, as far as respecting the terms of the sought-for accord, are not being followed to the T. How could we call into questions their neutrality on the issue? Unless, and that would be interesting to reveal, because they themselves might be targeted by the remnants of the unipolar order. It could somehow, yes, because, obviously China knows that, they are in the crosshair. So, it would be interesting to see if just because China is being invited into the Ukrainian conflict resolution mechanism as a guaranteeing power, and a permanent UN Security Council, and much more than that, if we are coherent, could see its own word being called into question, for very cynical political agendas. But
Yes.
I guess this is all we have right now as an alternative. Try to make it as all-encompassing and to water down this animosity at the continental level between the West Europeans, i.e., Brussels per se, and Moscow. So that bring some adult into the room, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, in any event, because it's nobody gets away with this. If this whole thing goes off the rail, it's not just Europe; it's the whole world that's going to suffer the consequences. And I think that's the argument that needs to be brought forward. To the extent we may see objections from the Europeans, well, they're not concerned. I mean, why should we take it to their opinions into consideration? And what are their interests? It's the world interest. I mean, we're dealing with, even if we temporarily remove the main sponsor of the Ukraine debacle, i.e. the US, owing to a timely change in personnel in DC, and focus solely on the European Union, we have two nuclear powers facing Russia, which is a nuclear power. That should be in and of itself the start of the discussion. It's like we are, playing with fire here.
They don't seem to get it. I mean, they just don't. They seem to be living in a world of delusion. They have little to no militaries, little to military hard power in the real sense of the word. Meaning, this idea of let's put military in Ukraine is nonsense. They get killed in a heartbeat. And so the only thing they do have is nuclear weapons. I mean, as you said, they're playing with fire, but they seem to be living in this kind of weird delusion that they can do something to change the situation. It's very strange. I have to hit you with this too. Nord Stream. So there was reporting that came out in the US. Now, the RT pointed out, well, I think it was Peskov, that said, hey, don't pay attention to some of the main stories that are coming out because these things are nonsense. One of the stories that came out was in Politico that said the White House is debating lifting sanctions on Nord Stream. Now, Witkoff and Rubio flipped out. Right? White House debates lifting sanctions on Russian energy assets, Nord Stream. The debate pits Steve Witkoff against the State Department and U.S. energy export proponents. All right. Rubio and Witkoff was like, this is trash. The story is not true. Which, honestly, their rebuttal is fascinating to me. Because what it means is they're not using sanctions for other reasons other than we don't like the fact that you're getting Europe energy. And it damages our ability to give Europe 5 times higher energy from LNG. That is a fascinating admission in that article, because they're talking about relieving, but the sanctions going back to 2014. At least that's what the Telegraph pointed out that Trump was thinking about. If that is true, but they're keeping sanctions on Nord Stream, and even in the rebuttal, it had everything to do with European energy. We want to supply European energy. We don't like the fact that Russia is supplying European energy. We blew up it for a reason. That is amazing admission. Like, this is not a free trade issue. This is we want Europe to be dependent on us issue. That's amazing.
There you go. So again, that's what I was saying earlier. Despite the great pronouncement by J.D. Vance, and even again during his trip in India, I think he alluded to it again, saying we want Europe to be Europe again, i.e., a peer player. But what you just discussed on the Nord Stream issue makes, it's completely inconsistent. And we're under the Trump administration, mind you. So you're right. It's all about keeping Europe captive and dependent on U.S. energy supplies, essentially, against their own interest. That's basically it. I don't see, in that sense, how this changes the equation. Now, to your illusion about lifting all the sanctions until going back to pre-2014. If you recall, when Kirill Dmitriev visited Washington about 10 days, 2 weeks ago, what did he say when he was queried about this question about the sanctions? The lifting of some of the sanction being maybe a carrot. He said, but nobody's asking for it in Russia. We don't
Right.
need the lifting of sanctions. We've never done as good as with the sanctions put onto us.
Right.
So if Russia is not seeking the lifting of sanctions, what else do you have as a negotiating tool? You don't have anything. Russia is completely self-contained, self-reliant. It's a force unto itself. It has found alternate markets. Its sheer size make it so that you cannot conceive any kind of international relation without it.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that has completely escaped the mind of the so-called strategists at State Department and all those think tanks in DC. Is that you cannot do to Russia what you were doing to Iraq and then to Syria. This is not this. It's a different scale. It's a different animal. It's just this whole strategy of constraining, containing. I mean, it might have worked with the Soviet Union because we all understood what the Soviet centralized state-controlled economy was all about, and you could just basically goad it into outspending itself into oblivion, which is to some extent one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed, that it could not resolve and reconcile those internal contradictions. But with Russia and the Russian Federation, which has completely embraced free market economy, even though the state still act as a measuring rod, no, it's not going to work. And Russia has proved and showed itself to be a very good student of capitalism as such, and the importance of industrial base within the context of being able to provide enough for its own people and to be able to export and provide again, yes, a supply of all kind of items to the world at large, not just energy. The energy sector was the go-to option in the first decade of Vladimir Putin's series of presidential terms. But now, since 2014, and on steroid now since 2022, we've seen that they have been able to fill all the niches left by Western companies, be they Europeans or Americans, which is why there's no rush to getting them back in, or under very strict conditions, because the Russian economy is growing at the rate it's growing owing to this need to provide to your own needs and to develop substitutes in every sector of the economy.
Supercharge the economy. Arno, man, thank you for this. Like I said, I was eager to have this conversation, just with everything going on with the negotiations, especially them tearing into Zelensky, and just even the comments coming out of Russia. This notion of Putin saying, hey, we're open to bilateral talks, moving back on that. This notion of, I mean, it was just a few items that was coming down that I was like, I really want to talk about. So thank you for this. Arno Delet. He is.
I would say, just as a final word, I think Russia knows very well that it's a dead end. So they don't mind kind of giving tidbits like this because they know they're not going to be latched on.
Well, last question, and this can be a yes or no. Does Russia want to keep the war going on?
Well, I don't think Russia needs. Well, it's difficult to the extent this war has been going on very well. Let's be objective about this,
right?
And it's really brought Russia into the next level. It's served as an accelerator. What has taken place the last 3 years might have taken 30 years,
right?
And that includes all the economic components of it. So, I guess for the Russian leadership, it's to find out what is, when is keeping a good thing going can over a certain stage or floating line become detrimental and adverse to your interest.
That is fascinating. Arno Delet, he is an author, political analyst, international lawyer, specializing in international criminal law. His latest books, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of the American Political Consensus. Arno, man, thank you for this. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal.
All right. And you too. You have a good one. I want to bring on my next guest. We are joined with the man himself, John Kiriakou. John
Good morning.
Kiriakou, always appreciate talking to you. How you doing, John? You doing all right?
I'm okay, thanks. I don't know how you
Thank you
get
for-
up at these ungodly early hours, though.
I am
Gotta have
sorry. I do this.
Espresso.
I'm sorry. I always have my coffee sitting here with me. John Kiriakou, former CIA officer. John, what are you doing? Are you still doing those events around Europe?
Yeah, I am doing a 100 event around the world speaking tour. Heading out again in another week on the second leg. We did Ireland and Northern England. Going back to Northern England and Scotland for this leg.
Oh, that's
Then,
so cool.
we're going to finish England in a month, then Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, continental Europe, the Persian Gulf, and we're going to finish off with 4 dates in East Asia.
Oh, I am so jealous.
It's really great.
That is awesome. Australia, the seafood is so good. It's so
Yeah,
good.
it's amazing.
Try kangaroo if you get the chance.
I've had kangaroo. I like it. It's a little bit stringy, but it's actually good. And I'll tell you something funny about the seafood in Australia.
It
You
is
know,
a weird taste.
Australia was a penal colony, of course. It was an English penal colony. And so the British, when they shipped prisoners in the early 19th century, they also shipped loads and loads of salted beef, cured salted beef.
Yeah.
And because it was very English to eat beef, and it came all the way from England. And so the prisoners were given fresh seafood, lobster, crab, fish, shellfish, thinking that was what the low quality, low class people ate. So the British sickened themselves on, year-old salted beef while the prisoners got to eat the fresh seafood.
Wow. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Clams, calamari. Oh God, this stuff is good. Thank you for joining me. And the
My
reason why
pleasure.
I brought you on, I was interested in the negotiations that are taking place between Trump and Iran. I have two minds of this, and I have a difficult time melding my two minds. One of the comments is like, he agrees with everybody. It's like, dude, I don't agree with everybody. It just needs to be logically consistent because I don't know which one it is. To give context, Wesley Clark, and I'm pretty sure you're aware of the taking down all of these governments, Iran being the last one, head of the snake, blah, blah, blah. Iran is the last one. Every other government has fundamentally been destroyed. Well, Afghanistan and Iraq are still there, but for the most part, they are not entirely independent.
Mm-hmm.
They've asked the U.S. to leave for God knows how many years, and the U.S. has said no. So there's independence for you. But Iran is the last independent actor in this process. Trump is talking about unilaterally attacking Iran. Iran did nothing to us. They're no threat to us, but unilaterally attacking Iran. And they've engaged in negotiations. Now, of course, Trump blew away the first JCPOA. He sends Witkoff. He sidelines the State Department. And so I look at them and think to myself, okay, well, despite this threat that's running through the presidencies and the administrations, he's sending a realist. He's not sending an ideologue. Otherwise, you send Rubio or you send, some other whack job. By the same token, there's a document that Brian Beletic put up, this called Path to Persia. And in the document, they point out these war plans. They point out one of the ways to deal with Iran is to effectively negotiate with them as if we're doing it for real while having Israel to attack, with the notion that we could say, well, we were negotiating in good faith. It is Israel that's doing that, not us. Give me your take on that. And the reason why I bring this up, when I had the conversation with Michael Maloof yesterday, Maloof was like, yeah, they come up with these plans all the time. And as I pointed out to him, Project for a New American Century was being carried out with the Bush administration. And it was being carried out using the people who were, let's say, not entirely aware that they were doing this. They were just doing their jobs, while a larger framework was taking place of them literally destroying a country and destroying the Middle East. You've been in the CIA. You've been behind the scenes on this stuff, which is the reason why I wanted to bring you in. Give me a take on that. When you're looking at these negotiations, do you see these negotiations as being legitimate? Do you think they are a stalking horse for something, let's say, subversive? Give me your thoughts.
This is incredibly complicated issue. First of all, let me comment on the document that you just had up on the screen. That was written by Dr. Ken Pollock. Ken is one of the foremost experts on Iran that exists in America. We were junior analysts together at the CIA 35 years ago.
Were you?
Yeah, and he left the CIA to go to Harvard to get his PhD, which he did, was immediately gobbled up by the think tanks, and then has taught on and off at the National War College ever since. He knows of what he speaks. With that said, like you, I'm talking to a lot of people on this issue, people who know more than I do.
Right.
And I'm getting a pretty consistent message. I spoke earlier this week with a relatively junior member of the Iranian negotiating team. And what he said was that the Iranians have been utterly taken aback by the seriousness and at the same time the flexibility of Steve Wynkoff.
Mm-hmm.
He has so far been only reasonable. The American position seems to have officially changed in that the Americans are not demanding that the Iranians not develop a delivery system, which has been the sticking point in the past. The Iranians, let's say the Iranians had a bomb, which they don't. They don't even want a bomb, according to 4 consecutive national intelligence estimates released by the U.S. intelligence community and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. But just for the sake of an argument, let's say that they have a bomb.
Yeah.
They don't have a system with which to deliver it to Israel. They don't have a missile that can carry a nuclear bomb that they could fire at Israel. And so the U.S. position has long been in these negotiations that they cannot develop a missile system. They cannot. And we've given up that position just in the last week. There was no announcement. There was no analysis. You can't turn on the news and see what they're saying about the U.S. now dropping its demand. But it happened in the negotiations. I think that we would get a better indication of the direction of these talks by listening to the statements made by the Iranian foreign minister,
right,
when they come out of the talks.
Right.
And the Iranian foreign minister has been like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going so well. The Americans have been perfectly reasonable, and we're looking forward to the 3rd round of talks, which are coming up soon. Now, keep that in mind at the same time as what everybody knows, that Donald Trump is obsessed with winning the Nobel Peace Prize. He thought he was going to get it with the North Koreans 8 years ago, and that didn't happen. But he hates the fact that Barack Obama has a Nobel Peace Prize, and Barack Obama did nothing to get it. If anything, Barack Obama should get the anti-Nobel Peace Prize because he killed more people with drones than any other president in American history.
It was because of Bush. It was a repudiation of Bush. That's all.
That's all it was. But that stings for a lot of Republicans, and especially for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So I think very cautiously, and remember, we are in an incredibly early phase of these talks. You remember the famous story during the Vietnam War where the first several rounds of talks at the Paris peace talks between the Americans and the North Vietnamese was over the shape of the negotiating table.
Right. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Are you serious?
Yeah, they argued for weeks. Yeah, they argued for weeks over the shape of the table to carry out the negotiations because the North Koreans were winning, so they didn't need to get to the table and negotiate peace. They were killing Americans every single day. Well, the Iranians have been fighting us for 46 years now. And so they would like an agreement. They don't really need an agreement. But what they want is for us to keep the Israelis off their backs. Okay, point 2. I'm very close to somebody who happens to be Iranian. Mm-hmm. And she goes to Iran regularly. And she's a pretty skilled political analyst in her own right. And she has been maintaining consistently that the Iranians have adapted so well to sanctions that they've gotten themselves to a point where they lack for literally nothing. What the stuff that they really, really need, they get from the Russians, the Chinese, and the Indians. And the stuff that the Russians and the Chinese and the Indians can't provide, they manufacture themselves. And so they don't need to have sanctions lifted. It would be nice because it would lead to outside investment. I say outside meaning Western European, possibly even American. But the sanctions just don't have a bite anymore. Certainly the sanctions haven't stopped them from enriching uranium.
Right.
And so that tells me that while the Iranians don't need an agreement would be nice because it would serve to keep the Israelis at bay and get the Americans off their backs, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic. Again, this is a very early stage.
Mhm.
We're still in the preliminary discussions, but I think this is a very good thing. And I'll make another point too. You know, it's so easy to criticize Donald Trump and say he's a dope and he doesn't understand these complicated issues. I don't think that's it at all. I think Donald Trump's a lot smarter than people give him credit for being. And he understands that Iran is a very big country with a whole lot of people. And they have had 46 years to learn to protect their military and nuclear installations. And they are deep underground to the point where this Iranian contact of mine told me that they don't fear American or Israeli bunker buster bombs. They just don't fear them. They're so deep, only a nuke could do some damage to them. And did the Israelis really have the guts to drop a nuclear weapon?
Oh, that's the rub, right?
Mhm.
I mean, even in the New York Times, when they were talking about it from the context of Israel attacking, with the U.S. supporting whatever attack they came up with.
Well, you notice that when Benjamin Netanyahu was here 2 weeks ago, it was a Saturday that he met with Trump, and he came with some immediacy because he knew that Trump was going to propose these talks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So you notice when he came out of the Oval Office, there was no press conference. Well, a press conference was scheduled, and Trump canceled it because he didn't want Netanyahu to bitch about the Americans turning on Israel and advocating talks with Iran. So that leads me to believe that Trump is actually serious about this.
Do you think Iran would do this on their own?
No.
I mean, I'm sorry, Israel would do this on their own. Without Trump.
Attack?
Yeah.
No. And I say no because, and I'm confident in that answer, because in all my years at the CIA and later on at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Benjamin Netanyahu asked every single president to attack Iran. And I mean George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, and all of them said no. And so the Israelis didn't go it alone.
So Trump has an instinct. Like, he could hit Yemen because he's not entirely concerned about Yemen.
Yeah, they killed 74 people in one strike last week. They don't care.
Mostly civilians. Like, all of them might have been civilians, for all I know.
Right. Right.
Iran is a different animal, though. And I suspect that what the White House knows is, okay, there's an unpredictability about consequences of that strike when they respond in whatever strike you do.
See, this is an important point you're making.
Yeah.
The United States always underestimates blowback. Always. It's like a thing with us. I've told you the story in the past, Jamarl, that the night before we invaded Iraq, I was the note taker in a principals committee video teleconference. It was chaired by Vice President Cheney. It had Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell and George Tenet and Tommy Franks and everybody that was going to be involved in the decision-making for the Iraq war. This is the night before we crossed the border into Iraq. And the senior director at the National Security Council said, when we cross that border tomorrow, they're going to throw flowers at us. He said that with a lot of bobbing heads from people with, advanced degrees from Stanford and Harvard and Yale. And I
really
said,
believe that though. He legitimately, because I am always in
these
this mindset.
neocons, the
They do
neocons,
believe this stuff.
they are true believers that we are the good guys and that everybody recognizes that. And I said to George afterwards, do these people know nothing about the Middle East? Do they know nothing about history? And he said, no, they know nothing. So, we always underestimate blowback and then we get bitten. Did we think that the Taliban were going to be able to hold us at bay for 20 years? Absolutely not.
No.
That the Iraqis were going to bog us down for 15 years, 18 years in a war? Absolutely not. But now they're thinking, you know what? We got screwed in Afghanistan. We got screwed in Iraq. We're still stuck in Somalia for all intents and purposes. Libya is a basket case. Maybe it's not such a good idea to invade Iran. And Donald Trump is a non-interventionist, kinda. So,
yeah, I mean, it's so unpredictable. Like
it is.
We can assume, okay, we can have these bombing runs and we can do this. We have no idea how bad their response will be. How many Americans are they going to kill? How many oil fields are they going to take down? How many, all of these things are consequences. And it's like, there's a real world, the president will be holding that back at the end of that, in the middle of a trade war. And he's already started, right?
That's right.
And won another war.
And in any other period, you would have the support, let's say, of the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis to attack Iran.
Right.
And we wouldn't have that support this time because they've been improving relations with Iran over the last 4 years. They've reestablished diplomatic relations. They've established new trade relations, and they don't want conflict in the Gulf. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense for them. So it's not just Netanyahu telling us, do it, do it, do it. It's all the Gulf Arabs saying, God, please don't do it. Please don't do it.
Okay, so the Saudi foreign minister, when he went to Iran, he's not telling him, hey, make a good deal. And then going to Americans and saying something like it's consistent. You do believe
it's consistent. And I believe that the Saudi foreign minister's visit last week, in which he took 70 people with him, right? They were all working level experts. I think that was far more about a message to the Americans than it was a message to the Iranians.
Really?
And the message to the Americans was, we brought every governmental expert that we have to Iran because that's how deep our relations are going to become. So hands off.
Wow. Okay. So from your point of view, these are legit. These negotiations aren't a stalking horse. Trump is actually, I mean, I saw Witkoff's speech, not speech, when he was on Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
And
I'm pleasantly surprised by him.
Same here. I mean, he sounded a lot like, I've said that I like Witkoff, and other people have bashed me for saying that. It's only, I don't even know the guy. It's just, he's not an ideologue in the way that
he's a pragmatist.
Yeah. And so when he goes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When he was appointed, I said out loud to a friend of mine, I said, not another billionaire. How many billionaires are we going to have? And if we've got, a Secretary of State, why is the Secretary of State not doing these negotiations? But I'll tell you why. Because Marco Rubio is a longtime and well-known neocon.
Right.
He's a Russia hawk. He's an Iran hawk. And you don't want a hawk in that position. You want a pragmatist who's going to be able to negotiate a deal.
Yep. And take Trump's point of view with him as he goes.
That's right.
Basically, you're my eyes and ears. You tell me what's going on. I don't want these people putting a knife in me like they did in my last administration. I'm choosing you to do it. That's the way I took it. And so far, that seems to be what he's done. When he went on Sean Hannity, he effectively said, yeah, in fact, he sounded a lot like the foreign minister for Iran, Arghachi. Both of them were saying the 3.6%, this is only about nuclear power. This is about nothing else. That was the way he effectively discussed it and explained it. And I was wow, these people are sounding very similar to each other. Maybe there's flexibility in the negotiation.
Donald Trump is also a nut for oil, right? He loves fossil fuels. the Iranians are sitting on an ocean of oil. They can't lift much of it because it's hard for them to get spare parts.
Mm-hmm.
So the Russians provide some, they make some in-house, the Chinese provide some, but they're going to need a lifting of sanctions to really get back online like they were in the 1970s. And I mean, how much would Donald Trump love cheap oil, even if it were to be Iranian oil?
Oh, that's so interesting. Because from Trump's point of view, this lowers inflation, makes things cheaper. He loves, drill, baby, drill, all that stuff. All that stuff in the whole market. Wow, that's fascinating. One last point before I let you go. Hexeth, what do you make? Give me some context on. See, I'm conflicted. One of the things that Maloof talked about yesterday was conflicts in the CIA between the DoD and the CIA. That there was like a war going on between these two groups in regards to intelligence sharing, what they share, what they discuss, even competition in like their briefings of the presidents or briefings of other, let's say, senior officials that are in various administrations. Is that? I mean, I'm assuming it's true. Maloof was pretty strong about it. What is your experience with this? I mean, is this something that you've come across?
Oh yeah, it's always been that way. There's always been an uneasy peace between DoD and the CIA. DoD has DIA, right, which is Defense Intelligence Agency, which is a component, of course, of the Pentagon.
Right.
They also have NSA, which is a component of the Pentagon, and that's why it's always headed by a 3-star general. But it's like, they work in these parallel worlds, but never the two shall meet. So if the Pentagon is doing a briefing, an intelligence briefing, it's going to include an order of battle briefing. The order of battle is always done by DIA, always. Okay. CIA has military analysts, but they're not going to brief order of battle. They may update the CIA leadership on order of battle, but they're not the primary briefers. That began to change with creation of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, because it took the CIA's primacy away. So the president's daily brief, which was exclusively a CIA product from 1947 to 2005, is now an ODNI product that anybody can contribute to. You don't have to be a CIA analyst. You can be DIA, State, NSA. You can be in Coast Guard intelligence. If you have something important enough that the president needs to see it, you can write it now. The CIA hates that. And it's resulted in some cross-contamination of intelligence authorities between CIA and DoD. It's kind of an uneasy piece, but Maloof is right. The CIA resents the fact that there are elements of DoD now that are sort of treading on their turf.
Interesting. That is so interesting. Oh man, that is so interesting. Yeah, he was saying it was bad, like especially during the Iraq War and leading up to the Iraq War.
Especially, I was still there, of course, during the Iraq War, and yeah, it was bad. Yes. I never understood why the CIA did order of battle briefings anyway. Do you know what an order of battle briefing is?
No.
It's you stand in front of a map and you say elements of the 1st Corps are moving in northeast, and then we've got elements of the 2nd Brigade of this division. Who cares? That's not analysis. That's just moving little puzzle pieces on a map. And DoD loves that stuff. But to me, it doesn't have any long-term intelligence value. It's where the enemy happens to have its troops at this given moment right now.
I see.
And DoD's good at that. That's what they do. They've got their satellites and they're watching the Iraqis move here, and then we move there, and then the Kuwaitis are here and the Saudis are there. And who cares?
That's a little weird for the CIA.
Yeah.
In their job description.
You get these nerds from the Directorate of Intelligence, and they just love this stuff. They just sit there with maps all day long and with their little puzzle pieces moving stuff around. I never understood the appeal.
One last thing. I got to hit you on the war in regards to Trump trying to negotiations with Russia. I've gotten very cynical about this. And the reason I've gotten cynical about it, Ted and I got into a back and forth on this, because it seems like, yes, they've been bashing Zelensky, trying to get him to fall in line on the issue of the Crimea. But the Russian red lines are red lines, or at the very least they seem to be. This notion, no NATO. Okay, well, how do you prove no NATO? How do you establish that Ukraine used to be neutral? They just tore it up. Like, how do you come to a deal that you just can't rip up, like in a few years? There's that. The notion of the 4 territories plus the Crimea. Okay, those are red lines. Those things are part of the Russian constitution. And as I pointed out, Putin has vocally said this on more than one occasion, including to his public. And I know the United States believes Putin is God-man, and he's the only person that counts. Every power has a constituent power base that allows that guy to be in power, which means he has people that he has to at the very least deal with. He has a constituency that he has to answer to himself. He has a public that he has to deal with and answer to. It will be very hard to walk those back. Now, he has been very diplomatic, saying, hey, I'll talk to Zelenskyy under certain terms, knowing full well that Ukraine has a law forbidding him to do so. Or I forget the other one that he did yesterday where he was effectively, they're being very diplomatic. Trump is trying to get this deal immediately. And Russia's like, hey, why are we rushing? Why are we rushing? Now, part of this is we're winning on the battlefield. These guys are going to collapse at some point. We have nothing to rush. We need to talk this out. We don't entirely trust you because you've pulled out of Minsk, you've pulled out of the Istanbul agreements. So we want to talk first. And Trump's like, we got to get it done. We got to get it done. Give me your take on this. I mean, am I being too pessimistic in regards to there's a gap that it seems like an American president can't jump, that Europe is not going to accept, meaning they're not going to accept troops in Europe. I mean, in Ukraine, that's a red line. That's an obvious red line. Denazification. Okay, what does that even mean? Is that getting rid of Zelenskyy and pulling it out root and branch? How do you do that as an American president? Like, all of this stuff is fascinating, but there seems to be a gap. Give me a take on this. Where are you on this?
You'll remember that 2.5 years ago, we all said, all of us, when we were at Sputnik doing our radio shows, we all said that in the end, the Ukrainians are going to have to cede territory.
Yes.
We all knew what it was going to be. It was going to be the Donbass and Crimea, and that Zelenskyy was going to have to go. And now here we are 2.5 years later. And I think we've come to that point. If there's going to be an agreement, it's going to be an agreement that we saw leak from the White House 2 or 3 days ago, that Donbass and Crimea become Russian, that Zelenskyy steps aside and elections be held in Ukraine. I wouldn't be surprised if Zelenskyy ends up living in London 6 months from now.
Really?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I don't think he can remain in Ukraine. He'll be a target, whether a target of Russians or even Ukrainians. And denazification is something that's a little bit more complicated because it's not like they carry membership cards, saying I'm a Nazi.
Yeah.
So that if the two sides are serious about that, I think there's going to have to be some sort of oversight, whether it's European Union or OECD or United Nations. Yeah, the Russians wouldn't accept that. They might accept UN oversight, but that doesn't have any teeth. So I have to agree with your earlier guest too that the Russians are winning, and while an agreement right now might be very nice, it's not absolutely necessary because all the Russians have to do is to keep doing what they're doing, and they'll end this thing on the battlefield.
Well, John, thank you for this. Oh man, I appreciate. I always
My
appreciate
pleasure.
these conversations.
Good
John
to talk to you
Kiriakou.
as always.
Oh, thanks, man. He is former CIA. John, are you still doing your show also at the same time as you're doing your events?
I've got a couple of things going on. I have a show with Ted Rall called Deprogram on YouTube. I have my own.
Fantastic, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, he's not an awesome guy. I've got my own interview show called Deep Focus, also on YouTube. That one's been shockingly popular so far. Good. And I've got a TV show on an online platform. The show's called CIA Declassified, and it's on Unified Television, UNIFYD. And everything I do, I put on Substack.
By the way, I've seen that show. You've done fantastic work on that.
Thank you. Thank you. We're in season 2, which is very exciting.
John, thank you for this, man. You be safe. Have a good one.
Take care.
You too. All right. Fantastic interview by John. I'm always curious about his politics, like what he thinks on this stuff going worldwide. I'm going to another fantastic guest. Like I said, we had a full show today. We are joined with Daniel Kincaid. I'm sorry, Daniel Kovalik, not Kincaid, Kovalik. He is an American human rights, labor rights lawyer and political activist. Previously taught at the International Human Rights of University of Pittsburgh. I think I got that right. I didn't add any weird stuff to it. Good. Because look, I had to trim the thing because I was like, okay, this is so wrong, right? The bio. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate you joining me. You
Very
were another
welcome.
person that I really wanted to talk to today because of, as I tell my audience, when I'm having these conversations, I actually want to have these conversations. Like the hardest show in the world is a show where you don't care about anything that's going on.
Right.
Today, I cared about pretty much everything. So I'm happy that you can join me.
Thank you.
There are multiple things that were bubbling up yesterday, one of which was a clip that blew my mind by Mahmoud Abbas. Now, Mahmoud Abbas, Palestinian Authority, president of the Palestinian Authority, for whatever that means or whatever that matters, not, in my experience, deeply unpopular. And part of the reason is, to make an analogy, the jailer, the Jew that held the other Jews in jail, to make an analogy. If you want to tell me I'm full of it on that one, please do.
No. I mean, he is a total puppet of the Israeli occupation. I mean, essentially, the Palestinian Authority under his rule does the bidding of Israel. They arrest Palestinians for Israel. They kill Palestinians for Israel. They keep the people under wraps. He's a vile person. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, he's very unpopular for those reasons. And I don't have enough bad things to say about him. I mean, is the truth.
I have yet to hear a person say anything good about Mahmoud
He's a
Abbas.
sellout. He's a sellout.
Yeah.
You know, he
No,
gets money from Israel and pockets it and does nothing for his own people.
So he gave this fiery denunciation. And I think that, the thing is at the bottom.
حرب الإبادة الإسرائيلية التي يتعرض لها قطاع غزة هذه فعلا يجب أن تتوقف. كل يوم في مئات القتلى. ليش الناس نسلم الرهين الأمريكية؟ طب يا أولاد الكلب سلموا اللي عندكم هذول وخلصونا من الشغلة.
All right. Now, what he's saying, just for the audience, in case they can't hear it, effectively, why don't you give up your weapons? Why don't you give up American hostages? Give us your weapons, you sons of bitches. I suppose the translation is in real world translation as opposed to sons of dogs. He's effectively talking about Hamas. Like, let the hostages go. Give your weapons to us, to the Palestinian Authority. What are you doing? All of these people are dying. All of these people are being killed. And, you and I were talking last night. There is a deep contradiction in resistance. Oh, there's a deep contradiction. Because two things could be happening. One, he is being pushed by Israel to say this. Two, he may actually mean it. We're the Palestinian Authority. We think we're saving lives in the way that we're trying to save lives, meaning this is maybe the way he frames it in the if I give him the best framing in the world. You guys have started a war that is getting all of these people killed. Now, I would argue that war has been going on for 70-something years, but whatever. You guys have done something that is getting all of these people killed, 50 to 100,000. God knows how many are in the rubble. Look at everything that's taken place. This is your fault. Give up the hostages. Give us your guns. Do something different. Now, that is deeply unsatisfying. To be just bluntly honest, that is deeply unsatisfying. Because the other alternative is, then what? Like, just accept the position you're in? Give me your take on this. For one, give me your take on what he said.
First of all, even if Hamas did that, there's no guarantee that the results would be any different than they are now. I mean, and also look at the West Bank, where the Palestinian Authority, does govern to some extent. They're being clobbered by Israel right now as we speak. Right. I mean, Israel's been destroying refugee camps, been engaged in mass arrests, including of children. And those people arrested are tortured. They've been assassinating people in the West Bank. The point is, it's not like the Palestinian Authority is making those people safe. Now, of course, compared to Gaza, I guess anywhere in the world's safer than Gaza at the moment.
Yeah.
That is true. But that was always true in Palestine. I mean, the West Bank was always safer than Gaza for various reasons. But again, Abbas cannot guarantee the safety of the people in Gaza in any case. And the truth is, by the way, I mean, Hamas has put a proposal on the table. I mean, where they've offered to give back all the hostages. By the way, they were willing to give back all the hostages on day one if Israel didn't invade, and they are willing to give all the hostages back now if Israel just stops the war. I mean, they're willing to do pretty much anything to end this war. So, and guess what? Israel's not interested in that deal because they don't care about the hostages. Okay,
Right.
so, and they don't care about anything really except destroying Gaza. I mean, they want to destroy Gaza, and it's not about destroying Hamas. They want to destroy Gaza. They want to totally depopulate it. So, first of all, there's nothing that could, again, making this deal with the Palestinian Authority, I don't think will save Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I mean, if Abbas could prove he was protecting his own people in the West Bank, that'd be one thing, but he can't. He can't show that,
I mean, even settlers, right? I mean, I was talking to a guy when I was on a radio station, and he lived in the West Bank, and he was talking about how the day before he was on the phone call with us, he was beaten by settlers. I think like broke his leg or arm or something to that effect. And the soldiers were effectively standing there guarding the settlers as they destroyed property, destroyed people, etc. And this seems to be just a pattern where we don't even report. Like, this is one of those things where it's just, we're talking about Gaza, ignoring what is taking place, this kind of corralling, this killing, this beating, this injuring.
What happens every day. And they destroy livestock, they destroy olive trees, with the Israeli Defense Forces standing by to, allow that to happen. Of course, let's remember that the Palestinian who won, the Academy Award, his film won the Academy Award for Best Documentary. About 2 weeks after that, 2 weeks after he was in Hollywood holding the Oscar, he was in the West Bank being lynched by settlers. Now, he was ended up surviving, but he was arrested. He was tortured. This guy won the Academy Award. Okay, he was on world TV with the Academy Award. The point is, if they will do that to someone like him, they'll do it to anyone. And meanwhile, the IDF recently shot two young Palestinian Americans, two young teenagers who also were Americans, who held U.S. passports, and no one cares about them.
By the way, Netanyahu went to the White House a day after they murdered that American.
Yeah, and no one cares. No one cares about him. No one cares about the Turkish American who was killed by the Israeli Defense Forces in the West Bank when she was involved in a peaceful protest. I mean, so there's no limits on Israel. And again, it doesn't matter if it's Hamas. It doesn't matter if it's the Palestinian Authority. That's completely irrelevant. And one at least can say with Hamas at the moment, at least Hamas is resisting. At least they're going down with a fight, which is more than the Palestinian Authority can say.
What does he think that if the Palestinian Authority was, in fact, do something for me, explain the history between these two groups? I know Israel at one point was feeding Hamas, like Joe Scarborough said, you fed that wolf. That's the Joe Scarborough when he was browbeating, I forget who was on, it might have been Netanyahu, I don't think it was Netanyahu, but whoever it was. Yeah, it was Netanyahu. He was browbeating him because of Joe Biden at that point was annoyed. But there was a point where Israel was effectively assisting in Hamas because they wanted this dichotomy between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Effectively, we want to make Hamas the face of resistance, not whatever's coming out of the PLO at the time.
Yeah.
And of course,
hmm
no,
Yeah, I
please.
mean, well, yeah. So first of all, the Palestinian Authority grew out of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was founded, the main leader by Yasser Arafat in the late 1960s, and it had I would say, honorable reputation in history for some time as a resistance organization, and it ended up negotiating the Oslo agreements in the early 1990s, which was supposed to result in a two-state solution. Okay, and the Palestinian Authority was ostensibly created out of the PLO to govern the Palestinians in the West Bank, to lay the groundwork for the West Bank to become
A state.
a separate
Sure.
state. And that was true in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority played essentially the same role there too. In Gaza, ultimately, as you said, it is true Israel helped support Hamas, not because they liked Hamas, but they wanted to undermine the Palestinian Authority because they never wanted the two-state solution to happen. So they wanted to undermine the Palestinian Authority. So they did support Hamas. Ultimately, Hamas was elected as the government of Gaza in 2006, I believe, or 2006, 2009. Anyway, around that period. And they have governed ever since. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority has governed the entire, time in the West Bank. But again, the two-state solution never happened. The Palestinian Authority, especially after Yasser Arafat's death, really calcified in the West Bank, and again became nothing but an Israeli proxy. It really morphed into something kind of the opposite of what the PLO was at one point. And even I think has tarnished Yasser Arafat's legacy quite a bit. I mean, there's still a lot of people, a lot of Palestinians who love Yasser Arafat, but a lot kind of retroactively felt that he sold them out with the Oslo agreements, which have done nothing for the Palestinian people.
I mean, I think the problem is they were in a weaker position in the negotiation. I mean, you have the United States, who's effectively an ally of Israel, negotiating a deal with another group. So how is the US, who has given billions to this entity, negotiating an agreement that's going to be fair in the way that the agreement is built? Or am I wrong in this? Did Bill Clinton
Well, of
negotiate
course.
this
I mean,
honestly?
yeah, I mean, the U.S., as people would say, is the mediator in its own negotiations, because in
Exactly.
the end, right, this is as much the U.S.'s war as it is Israel's. And that's why you see that the U.S. is not ultimately bargaining in good faith, nor is Israel, in the sense that they had a ceasefire. Let's remember, there was a ceasefire deal that Hamas was honoring. Israel never honored it, and then began to really violate it even more when it stopped allowing any aid into Gaza. And that's now been, I think we're on the verge of 2 months that there's no food or water or anything allowed into Gaza, in violation of the ceasefire agreement, which Israel had agreed to and the U.S. had approved. And now they want to renegotiate the deal with Hamas, right? I mean, this is what they do constantly. How can you negotiate under those circumstances? And again, it needs to be said, you don't even need an agreement for food and medicine and water to be sent to Gaza, because international humanitarian law requires that to be done anyway. But they're forcing Hamas to negotiate over whether something Israel's legally required to do is going to be done, right? And again, the U.S. is part of those negotiations. So it's an absurd no-win situation that Hamas has been put into, because again, it's not about, they don't want a win-win, which is, how you negotiate something. They want a win-lose. They want Israel to win, and not only Hamas, but all the Palestinians in Gaza to lose. So there's no way for Hamas to negotiate their way out of this. They've all more or less agreed. Well, they have agreed to everything that Israel claims it wants.
As you said,
to
they
end
don't
this
care.
war, and Israel still won't take that deal because
Yeah, as you said.
yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry. No, please. I thought you paused. I'm sorry. That's
because
on me.
what they want is not what they say they want. What they want is to destroy Gaza, right? And that ultimately is what they're doing. And so there's no way to negotiate out of that situation.
I saw this yesterday. Somebody put it on Twitter, and they didn't put the article on Twitter. They put a quote from it on Twitter, effectively saying Israel wants to give Palestinians $5,000 to leave Gaza. They give them jobs. They go to France, UK, etc. They have magnificent lives. You know, they'll get free food on the weekends and whatever. And there's a long thread on Reddit that goes into it that talks about it. I didn't want to use Reddit because at the very time it was discounted, suspended. So I went to Haaretz. Haaretz also tracked down some of these text messages that were going out to various people. And the messages have effectively gone through the Gaza Strip. Now, for whatever reason, Haaretz has this annoying ad here, but it says Palestine is not for sale. Hamas calls Palestinians to ignore texts promoting immigration from Gaza. Israel, when contacted about this, was like, we have no idea what you're talking about. No clue. Now, the text messages effectively say, hey, contact so-and-so, part of the Israeli Defense Force, and we will work out something. Now, Hamas' point is they are trying to get spies into the ranks. Do not pay attention to these texts. They're not letting you go out. They're not going to give you $5,000, and they're not giving you a trip to Paris or France. I believe it is true. They want these people to leave. I do not believe Netanyahu is giving these people $5,000. And Israel itself does not own up to the fact that they're sending these text messages.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to give that money. I mean, first of all, Israel doesn't have that money to give. Their economy's in shambles. But also, all they would have to do is open up the Rafah crossing, and there would be many Palestinians who would go into Egypt at this point because things are so bad in Gaza. But instead, Israel has closed the Rafah crossing. There is no way out for those people.
Mhm.
So it makes no sense that they would pay people to leave when they won't even let them out if they wanted to go now, right? So again, what does that lead to? What conclusion must be drawn is they don't just want the Palestinians to leave Gaza. They want to murder the Palestinians. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're killing children, right? They are killing the future of Palestine. Again, that's why this is a genocide. It's not just an ethnic cleansing. They are trying to destroy the Palestinians as a people.
But Egypt did not want them in Egypt. So would Egypt
Well, they
even
didn't
let them?
want them en masse. That's true. But they were allowing people in. They allowed at least about 100,000 Palestinians in if they were wounded or if they could pay a certain amount of money, $5,000 to $6,000 per adult, $1,000 per child.
Where are they going to get $5,000?
There were people who did it. I know Palestinians who did that. They sold everything they owned. They depleted all their savings. Some had, of course, relatives in Europe or other places who were making some money. They got it from them. And yeah, so there were tens of thousands of Palestinians who took that deal, paid, for their entire family, $15,000, $20,000 to one company that's owned by the son of the president of Egypt. So Egypt made millions of dollars off the suffering of the Palestinian people, and again, allowed about 100,000 to move into Egypt. By the way, those people have no rights. They can't work. They really have no immigration status. They can't travel because they can't get papers from Egypt. So they're being exploited. But the point is, they did allow a certain number in, and I'm sure would continue to allow a certain number in if that crossing were allowed to be open, but it's not.
That is disgusting.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
a reality.
That is disgusting. I know that's reality, but gee.
It's a horrible reality. And many of the Palestinians, again, I went to Cairo. I met with many of these Palestinians. Many who don't have means are living in basically these tenements with other Palestinians. They're like ghettos. No other people are allowed to go there, and they're living in terrible circumstances. They don't have money for food. They don't have health care. Again, it's such an
These
awful situation.
these Arab governments, like, for fuck's sake, like, you get all of these Arab governments that are like, oh my God, I can't believe Israel is doing this. Across the Middle East, oh my God, I can't believe this is outrageous. Israel's committing a genocide. They would have all of these harsh words. And then will ruthlessly exploit the poorest of the poorest who are in a situation that they themselves define as a genocide. That is astonishing. Like,
Yeah, it's astonishing. No, they're part of the problem. I know one woman there. She came from Gaza after her. She lost her husband. She lost her eldest son in an attack by the Israelis on a school they were staying at. Her youngest daughter and older daughter were both wounded, so they were allowed to go to Turkey. The two daughters. She was able to get out into Egypt, where she is now, but her two younger sons, are still in Gaza. So can you imagine that? She's separated from her two younger sons who still are in Gaza and are not allowed in Egypt. And after losing her husband and her elder son. I mean, it's just, and then there's many stories like this, So, no, in the Arab countries, like especially the Gulf states, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, but also Egypt, Jordan, they're part of the problem. They're complicit in all this. And Turkey, which is not Arab, but it is a Muslim country, is supplying oil to Israel. If Israel wasn't getting the oil that Turkey was supplying from Azerbaijan, which is another Muslim country, by the way, Israel couldn't prosecute this war, and yet that continues. So, I mean, there's so many people with their fingerprints on this crime. It's like an Agatha Christie novel, really.
Yeah. Is the issue that the U.S. has associations, has the term quisling governments have been used to describe the Gulf states?
Well, yes, in a sense, although, yes, but, certainly in the case of Egypt and Jordan, you could say they depend on the aid from the U.S. to keep going. Okay, so they're in a certain situation. That's not true of the Gulf states. They're oil-rich, very rich countries. They could stand up to the U.S. if they wanted to, and they have in the past. They did in 1973 with the oil embargo. So, but they obviously think it's in their self-interest to continue to play ball with the U.S. and Israel. Qatar has actually been involved in joint military exercises with Israel in Greece.
That's Iran.
It's shameful. It's just shameful. These are very corrupt governments all the way around, but again, some of that, the U.S. and Britain and other Western countries did their best to get rid of independent, secular, nationalist governments like the one of Nasser in Egypt, right? I mean, there were much better governments in these countries, and the U.S. has systematically gotten rid of those governments, and in their place are these quisling governments,
Last question, and it's historical. I don't entirely know the answer to it. The elections that took place where Hamas beat the Palestinian Authority, I remember Hillary Clinton was like, she said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, if you wanted a result, you should have made sure the result was exactly what you wanted. Effectively saying, you shouldn't have let him win. Like, you should have been true-ted in that election to make sure you got the government that you wanted. I've heard that there were killings. I've heard that there was threats being leveled, like meaning that it was somewhat of a harshly fought election. I mean, in every term of the word harsh. Was the Palestinian Authority at that point in the Gaza just unpopular?
They were unpopular because they were not advancing the interests of the Palestinian people there. In the way that they're not in the West Bank. And again, if there were popular elections in the West Bank, you better believe that Abbas would not win that, and the
They would lose.
Palestinian Authority wouldn't win that. And that's why they aren't holding elections in the West Bank. They haven't for years, because they know they'd lose. No, Hamas won fair and square. And in fact, at first, there were some Western news outlets who welcomed it as a democratic victory, and then they quickly turned on them because they didn't like, the nature of them. But in any case, it was they were democratically chosen,
As a government, what were they advocating for? What were they pushing for? Because it's a revolutionary government. It's right. It's kind of like I want to use South Africa as a template, kind of, where you get the after apartheid, you get this ANC coming into power, and they're like, we have a mandate from the people to do something very specific. It's not like the U.S. government where Democrats get in and they're like, yeah, we're just holding back Republicans. It's not random. It's very specific. We have a revolutionary government that we're trying to change the status of this situation on the ground. What were they pushing for when they first got in office?
Well, they certainly wanted at least a Palestinian state, which again the PLO had agreed to with Israel, but that promise was never kept, and the Hamas wanted that promise kept. I mean, first of all, it's not, there's divisions within Hamas. There's divisions within Fatah, which is the party of the Palestinian Authority.
Mm-hmm.
Some want that two-state solution, though I think many realize that that's not a possibility anymore. Israel's made that impossible. So they want a one state that is multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, one person, one vote, right? And the Israelis who would want to stay under those circumstances could stay. But they would be one, each of them would get one vote like all the other people. And the Israelis don't want that because they would be outnumbered and would lose, the government. So, but there's some people that want that one state solution, which I think, by the way, is becoming a more common demand. Again, because where is the Palestinian state going to be now? Gaza's destroyed. The West Bank is carved up in all these with all these settlements. So, really, I think the only option is this multi-ethnic state. One person, one vote.
This will sound very bad. And so I don't say this in a pleasant sense. I say this as an African-American in America. I get the sense that it is going to be very difficult to kill 2 million people. They could do it. We will give them the weapons to do it. But it would be very difficult even for a fascist regime to do it, whether that's in the West Bank or whether that's in Gaza. And if indeed they are trying to subsume all of Gaza and subsume all of West Bank as, okay, all of this is now Israel that we're accepting. And we are going to run an apartheid state because we have to. Otherwise, it's not going to be a Jewish state. It's going to be a state for everybody. And we're going to be outnumbered in the vote. And I get the sense that what would need to take place is a resistance inside Israel in the same way that African Americans had to push and push going all the way back from slavery. Meaning in the same way that South Africa had this fight over apartheid, the fight that may take place, and I could be talking on my ass on this, but that may take place is internally in this kind of political way of trying to get rights, trying to push and push and push for some level of equality within the context of the state. That, if that's true, that is like 100 years. I think of how long.
I mean, and there's not really a political party that of any size that represents that view within Israel. I mean, there used to be a strong left in Israel. There was a strong Communist Party, Labor Party. They're not. I think the Communist Party maybe has 1 or 2 seats in the Knesset now. I mean, they're tiny, and there's really no Labor Party to speak of. I mean, it's pretty monolithic within Israel proper. I mean, there are many Arabs who are Israeli, who have Israeli citizenship who live there, but they're second-class citizens. They're not organized. The point is, there's no one to really fight that fight within Israel proper, right? And so, as you say, I don't see that really happening. And that's why the armed resistance amongst the Palestinians really is necessary because,
That's
there
all there
is
is.
no viable political option to change the system. Yeah.
Daniel, man, I love these. I love to explore this stuff, and
I
thank
enjoy
you.
it. Yeah, of course.
And thank you for the history lesson on this. I wasn't understood the basics, but I didn't understand how that changeover took place. In fact, I remember Yasser Arafat. That's part of
Yeah,
my
of
political
course.
history. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
people used to have posters of them in their house. By the way, I just want to show my book here, The Case for
please,
Palestine, Why It Matters,
absolutely.
Why You Should Care. You can get it on Amazon or at my publisher, skyhorsepublishing.com. And anyway, I do talk about all that history in there and more. So
Check this book out, especially if you care about this issue. I will tell you, I've had people sending me emails. We must talk about the Palestinian issue. Please keep talking about the Palestinian issue. Don't stop talking about this issue. Dan Kovalik, he's an American human rights, labor rights lawyer, political activist, author. You just saw his book. He was previously on international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and great friend of the show. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it.
long live and prosper. Thank you.
I know.
Thank you,
You
my
have a
friend.
good one.
Take care now.
You too.
Okay.
Bye-bye. All right. I really appreciate the conversation with Daniel. He knows this stuff. He literally wrote the book on it. So if you're interested in that book, definitely check him out. I would like to go into a little domestic before getting to my next guest. My next guest comes at about 30 minutes, give or take. He wrote the book on JFK versus the Zionists. Considering the JFK files have just been released, that should be super interesting in order to get his take on not just the files itself, but the book and the kind of history that he documented in that book. I mean, he has documentary evidence of JFK's role and take. And, it's wild. The presidents used to be different on this issue. They were not as obsequious to Israel as they are now. For example, our last progressive president, Richard Milhouse Nixon. I am not a crook. Listen to what he says here. This is, you would never hear President say this today. I just don't believe you would. This is Nixon.
I felt it. The fact is that American Jews support Israel. And I understood that. And the fact is that every Jewish prime minister that I have known has enlisted American Jews to bring as much pressure as possible in the political process on American presidents. That's understandable. I don't object to it. Now, a president must not go along with it on occasion, because let me explain something about what is called the Jewish lobby in this country. In the first place, Jews understand, because of what happened in World War II, because of the Holocaust, are going to put first priority on the survival of Israel. Now, as good Americans as they are, they believe that America's survival and security is directly related to Israel's. In other words, their belief is that being for Israel first means that does not mean you're putting America second, because they think it goes together. An American president, however, has to approach it in a different way, in my opinion. He's got always to think first of what is best for America. And that's true whether it has to do with the Israelis or whether it has to do with the Irish or the Germans or what have you, or the Poles, etc. Usually what is best for America is also best for Israel and vice versa. But on occasions, for example, an American president must make a decision that does not, in effect, give the Israelis a blank check. And one example of that is a decision that I made. I decided early on in our administration that we were going to seek good relations with Egypt and others of Israel's neighbors. Many of my Israeli friends didn't like that because they wanted a special relationship with Israel and Israel only. But I have always said that Israel's interests are better served to have the United States a friend of Israel's neighbors and potential enemies than to leave a vacuum which the Soviet Union would fill. I still believe that, and I think that should be American policy today.
crystal clear, straightforward, explained it well. That does not seem to be the case today. That just doesn't seem to be the case today. And look, if I remember this history correctly, and I think I do, you heard Daniel Kovalik mention Nasser in Egypt. Well, there was a plot to get rid of Nasser, which is what Daniel was alluding to, that they were, Israel, the UK was effectively trying to get rid of Nasser. This has to do with the Suez Canal thing. They always said that this was the canary in the coal mine that made it clear that America was the leader of the world as opposed to the UK. And in that, right, the president was like, if we don't do something about this, the Soviet Union is going to be able to make friends with all of these other Arab countries. We're going to be alienated. We can't allow this. Now, Nixon is pointing something out that should be brimmingly clear. American interests differs and comes first because he's an American president. So when you have a Biden administration that is given 70%, that is alienating the world because this, let me say it this way. There's value to propaganda. And there's an argument to be made that any sort of political rhetoric is some level of propaganda. I don't think that's necessarily true, but that's effectively the way it's in our normal parlance. I don't like what you're saying, so what you're saying is propaganda. Okay, yeah, I do, but what I'm saying is actually flat fact, true. It's like, yeah, but I still don't like it. It's the way they talk about it. When Joe Biden is trying to enforce a narrative, he's trying to enforce a narrative and trying to exclude other narratives that contradicts what he is effectively saying. Hence, we need to put in censorship in social media. We need to put in censorship in the way we talk about this stuff. We need to isolate certain opinions. We're going to need to shadow ban other opinions. Okay, you need to do all that when you are saying something that A, is not true, and B, needs to be defended because it's not necessarily true. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that people saying something true won't be attacked. You will be, because other people may have points of view that they just, they don't like what you're saying, even if you can validate and prove what you're saying is true. I'm just trying to make the very basic point, though, that there's a value to it. There's also a value to this idea of soft power, right? Like America's love and light with freedom and justice. Okay, there's a value to that. With the shining city on the hill, there's a value to that. There's a value to people seeing you as that thing of, okay, they're moral, they're ethical, they're so-and-so. You become this kind of moral center, this thing that can be trusted, this brand of sorts. Brand matters. When Obama is running in the first election and it's like no drama Obama, a steady hand on the tiller, those are positive attributes. Whether they're true or not is secondary to the point. The fact that people thought that gave it value or gave it strength and power. It's in Game of Thrones. I know I keep saying this, but it is true. Power is a shadow on the wall. People respond to something, whether it's true or not, but they're thinking about that thing. When Ronald Reagan had the Cuban Missile Crisis, Iran-Contra affair, before that, it would be unheard of that America would be overthrowing governments. And yet, we were overthrowing governments. We were paying kill squads in South America, knocking over the Iranian government. We had no issue doing this stuff, especially within the context of what we consider to be our backyard, which was South America. If you asked Americans, they would say, we don't do that. We don't do that. We're better than that. It's the way we saw ourselves and the way other countries potentially saw us. There's value in that. That value has been burned. I mean, burned in the ashes of Gaza, to put it mildly, when you get the UN effectively condemning what they consider to be a genocide, with all of these human rights organizations considering it's a genocide, with us standing arm in arm by fascists running an apartheid state committing a genocide. That looks bad. When you're ripping up deals that you've effectively made, that looks bad. Now, when we're talking to other countries, we're talking to them as if that political capital is still there, as if those other countries don't know that you can't be trusted. You lose something when you can't be trusted in a negotiation, and when other countries don't trust you because you've ripped up the Minsk agreements. Angela Merkel comes out, yay, we didn't believe in these things in the first place. Okay, well, you made an agreement that was signed by all of these countries that you have effectively said, we don't believe in. We never believed in it. We did it purely to allow Ukraine to build up the biggest military in Europe. Okay, that looks bad, right? Same thing is true if you are trying to make deals with Hamas, saying, hey, let's make a deal to end this conflict, or at the very least, I used to call it a pause because I knew it wasn't a ceasefire, but a pause. And then allows one of the parties to violate it, ruthlessly so, and say nothing about the fact that they're violating it and continue to give weapons to the side that is violating it. Okay, that looks bad. And other countries in the world with social media can look at their social media every day and see Israel murdering kids, Israel raping people in the jail cell, Israel torturing people. They can see it. Meaning it's not the evening news anymore, or the only thing you get is 11 light. You can go on social media and you can see real world phenomena as it happens in real time. This is not to say other governments are perfect. I guess my point of view is America is a government just like any other government and functions what it considers to be its best interest like any other government does. We are not a Star Trek country in the way that we presented ourselves, and then sometimes in the way we still try to present ourselves. Joe Biden was our president. Put that in context. Donald Trump right now is our president. Put that in context. Neither of them are as articulate as Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon was a criminal. Like I'm trying to reconcile these things to try to get across. We lose something in support of a batshit crazy country with nukes. We lose something. If Trump has an instinct in him that he doesn't want a large-scale war that is unpredictable, that's good. By the same token, he is killing civilians in Yemen. Who knows if he's going to get a deal with the Russians? I have no idea. I think there's a gap that's going to be difficult to leap, but who knows? Time will tell. It's fascinating, this changeover. And we are going to have to deal with other countries, not from a position of moral, ethical, etc., but from a position of effectively starting trade wars that were unnecessary, using trade wars to effectively punish other countries to ruthlessly exploit those countries if we can get the opportunity to do so. Like, this is the position that we're effectively taking. Jim, what is his name? I can't think of his last name. He points out Donald Trump is the best villain for this country to have at the time that we're currently in. And all of that political capital has effectively been burned. It's been burned. Nixon, on that case, in the very specific case that American interests should come first, is right. The notion that you're putting in Israelis into cabinet positions is outrageous. Just fucking insane. The lunatics that you've surrounded yourself with, and done so in part because of the amount of money that they were putting into your G-string over and over again over the course of the campaign. Okay, that looks horrible. And it looks like your policy decisions are directly being pushed by foreign government. Same thing is true for Democrats. Now, in their mind, they may say, from a foreign policy sense, it is in the U.S. best interest to allow Israel to grow as a colony in the way that the United States grew, and to basically be this kind of centerpiece that breaks up the Middle East and prevent the Middle East from coming together in some kind of cohesive form. They may think that, they may even go with that, but they miss the bad blood that is created by us doing that. We are Americans, period. Nixon is right. That should be the first and foremost best interest. I don't believe that that is in our best interest. And for many Democrats, they agree with that, by the way. Many Republicans agree with that. I mean, you might get like 70% of Democrats, maybe 50% of Republicans. Fair enough. That is a large amount of Americans that take the position, what is happening is outrageous, and the fact that we're supporting it is outlandish. And yet, the political branch ignores all of these Americans that say, America should come first, and what you guys are doing is fucking outrageous. That's astonishing. Criminal. Richard Nixon, I'm not a crook, getting onto a helicopter, seems to have a better take back then and is far more articulate than the last two presidents, than what we have now. I think he would look back on this and would find this to be astonishing, what they're doing, and the fact that they're blowing off the overwhelming majority of American public opinion in order to do it. It is outrageous, it is outlandish, it is a betrayal of American ethics and ideals to be able to do that. The notion, putting aside Biden's censorship for the moment, because both complain about censorship, right? Everyone goes, oh my God, they're creating censorship regimes. You are creating a censorship regime yourself. Nina Jankowicz, for example, her Biden's Ministry of Truth, that lunatic. So there's that. So don't cry me a river on this notion of, oh my God, they're stopping us from speaking. They are, but so are you. In the sense of Trump, this notion that you're going to deport people because they have an opinion against a foreign government is anti-American. Full stop. Anti-American. This notion that you are going after universities to try to change their course curricula to get rid of Middle Eastern studies or to benefit a foreign government is, again, anti-American. That stuff should be fought against regardless, and especially if you're part of MAGA. The question really comes in on whether or not you're functioning as an American or whether you're functioning purely ideologically for a particular person, almost like as a dear leader, a Hitler type figure. And I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler. I'm comparing this weird allegiance that goes against American ethos for foreign government just because Papa tells you to do so. I'm saying that stuff is anti-American. And for whatever particular reason, I would argue ideological reasons, they follow it. Now, liberals are no better in this. They just have a different leader that they're willing to follow and willing to fall in line, almost as this cultish devotion that they use for their political party and whatever their political party does. On the positive side, this works if you're trying to get a negotiation, trying to end the war, where you're like, all right, all of you other neocons, shut the fuck up. I'm Big Papa, I'm Donald Trump, fall in line, or else I'm going to punish you politically. Okay, fair enough. That works, right? That is not anti-American, that is just politics. You will be punished if you go against what I am going to do. I got a mandate, kind of, and I'm going to run with that mandate. Part of the mandate is to end the war. Damn it, I'm going to do it. It is, which I approve of, by the way. And I approve of it because it is our political space. It is how you do politics. If there is no punishment, they can do, you're going to have chaos in regards to the way that your political actors who have their own priorities go against you. If you notice, for Donald Trump pushing in order to end the war, he's using Wickoff. And as he uses Wickoff, and Wickoff gets attacked, Trump doesn't care about the attacks at all. Wickoff stays on the job because Wickoff is carrying his point of view. Now, whether or not that point of view can mind the gap is secondary to the point that he seems to be carrying a certain point of view that many in the Republican Party may be against, but are not necessarily openly going after Trump in large numbers, despite the fact during the Biden administration, all of them agreed to keep the war going. It's the liberals that seem to want the war to continue, which is just fucking bizarre. And I suspect it has a lot more to do with Hillary Clinton. I'm getting off my point. There are things as an American that we should prize. The First Amendment is one of them. The idea that we are willing to destroy, cripple any notion of the First Amendment for a foreign government is radically anti-American. Whether Trump is doing it, whether Joe Biden is doing it. And I understand that free speech has limits, fair enough. Simping for a foreign government that gave you $100 million, it's not it. You're missing the boat. You're missing the plot. I want to move on to another story. Just fucking outrageous. Hegseth, it's embarrassing. I don't have anything else to say. He's just embarrassing. And I mean that in the sense of the signal leaks. I mean that in the sense of trying to get his wife security clearances, which apparently she does not have, by the way, but was trying to get security clearances. Blue was slightly off on that. Apparently, he wants a makeup artist available because, he has to look good. He has appeared seemingly drunk on camera at other times. He came out with this video, I believe this was yesterday, effectively saying, look, fat people in the military, That's a no-no. No more fat people in the military. We don't like fat people in the military. I mean, the military looks bad. And just to be fair to Hex up on this, wait, just to be fair, I will take I'll take a contrary position on this, or let me see, unpopular position on this. A military is not designed to be woke. It's not. And when I see, let's say, Democrats or others are like, we have X number of trans people in our military. We have X number of women in our military. We look at all of these people in our military. And I think to myself, dude, the job of the military is to be lethal. That's it. Can you kill, and can you kill effectively? Can you win a particular war? Can you win a conflict? Can you beat the shit out of a bear with your bare hands? If that answer is yes, I want you in the military. If that answer is no, maybe we can find other roles for you. I understand that women or others, people maybe want to be in the military. And I'm saying other people, just people who may not be qualified in general. I get that. But the job of it is not to be diverse in the sense of everybody's welcome. The job is, can we be lethal and kill the enemy? That is my point of view on the military. So I'm not giving Hegseth a pass on this, because there are other positions in the military that you could be in that is not in combat. From the combat standpoint, can you eat a bear? That is my point of view. Hegseth came out yesterday and said this. Jesus Christ, he's fucking embarrassing. It's one thing to think this. It's one thing to even implement this as a policy. It's one thing to come out and say it. Right here. It's
Capable of doing what
I would say he does not have the cadence of the Secretary of Defense that we are accustomed to. And maybe that's my issue.
troops fighting in the unit that many of you will lead are capable, truly physically capable of doing what is necessary under fire. They need to be fit, not fat, sharp, not shabby, especially our leaders. And that's why we're reviewing how the department has maintained standards in the past, especially the last 4 years, and whether those standards have dropped, formally or informally. Troops fighting.
I would say those standards have dropped. The fact that he's defense secretary. Look, if a guy has been in the military for, let's say, 30 years, he's not in a combat role, he bubble up into leadership, and he's gained 30 pounds, I don't care. At a certain point, you're in the military for your mind, not because you can, be in a ditch and attack the enemy. So I get the point of, we don't want, it just sounds weird, overweight troops. But he's talking about leadership positions. He's talking about like people who are the brain trust, who's been in the military for X number of years, who's been in combat, who's making combat decisions, he's talking about those people. We don't want fat people. We don't like the look of fat people in our leadership. Dude, is this the hill you are willing to die on right now? Like, if this is the most important thing to you in this moment, whether we have fat leaders in our military. He also comes out in another clip. Now, the one he's saying for Europe is fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me because I don't know. I will tell you, it's very weird to me that the United States does not want the leadership that it had for Europe, if that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't we want vassals on another continent? Again, if that makes sense. If you're looking for world primacy, wouldn't you at least want to keep Europe in your back pocket? Would you at least want to maintain that transatlantic relationship and maintain it in a way where you are, on some level, directing events? Now, if America is still directing events behind the scenes, with negotiations being somewhat of a sham, which they could be, by the way, regardless of what they say, what is taking place behind the scenes could be something very different. Europe seems to be gearing up for war. If I take this as a shallow way, with events as they seem, it seems that America has more temperance in this issue and wants to pivot to China and let Europe effectively deal with Russia. My concern in this is that Europe has started 2 world wars and seems to be trying to start a third. And if it is indeed a world war, I have a hard time believing that America doesn't get drawn into it. Meaning, I don't believe this notion that Europe goes to war and it just stays in Europe. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. I also don't believe that Russia is fighting alone. There's that too. If America is making this pivot to China, does America get involved with some kind of conflict? Which, like, I guess I hope this is chaos. This is utter chaos, right? I don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. If I take this purely as the U.S. is putting it, we are effectively saying we're done with Europe. This is the speech that Hegseth made yesterday. This is the speech that Hegseth made once before when he went to Europe, effectively saying, you guys need to pay 5%. You need to take care of NATO. You need to take care of your own responsibilities. I kind of believe that. I kind of don't, considering what Europe seems to be doing right now. But this is Hegseth yesterday, making this case, Europe. It's America first. I don't think it's true. I think it's Israel first, but whatever. You guys are on your own.
America first doesn't mean America alone. It means we expect our allies to step up, to be true force multipliers for freedom. This approach ensures we achieve peace through strength. The time of the United States, here in Pennsylvania, here in our country, being the sole guarantor of European security has passed. It's long overdue. Europe has to step up military and lead. NATO. America first doesn't mean America alone. It means we expect our allies to step up.
You know what's wild about this? And I think, I don't know who said it. I don't know if it was John Balouf or Arno, but effectively, they're getting weapons from us. They're getting oil from us. We have been taking businesses from them because they can't afford all of those things. We have been deindustrializing Europe. So at the same time, he's making this argument, Europe needs to step up. They need to be grown-ups. They need to do so-and-so. Donald Trump is still saying, you need to buy your oil from us, or else we're going to continue with the tariffs. Obviously, they're going to have to buy their weapons from the U.S. because if they try to get Russian weapons or weapons from somewhere else, we are going to lose our minds over it. So we want them to step up while simultaneously being dependent upon us to provide them with the things they need to step up. We don't want an independent Europe. We still want a subservient Europe, but we want them subservient in a different way. It's very strange. It's very odd. I would say with Hegseth, with the signal leaks, this looks so bad. And by the way, from my understanding, there was reporting that he wanted that signal himself, meaning this was something that he himself requested be added into like his office or something like that. He is the one that put signal on his system. Nobody else. He chose it. I would say Hegseth should know better. Hegseth should know better. Let me bring in my guests. I am eager to have this conversation. We are joined, let me get this right. There we are. We're joined with Ken McCarthy. Ken, welcome to the show, man. How you doing? You doing okay today?
It's good. It's a good day so far. Thank you for asking. How about you?
I am doing good. You have had a hell of a bio. I was going through your bio and I was like, okay, maybe this is the wrong person. And then I realized, oh no, he's just done all of these things in addition to writing these books. So just to give the audience, Ken McCarthy, he's an American activist, educator, entrepreneur, internet commercialization pioneer, author of the book JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zion Extremism, the documentary Evidence. I'm fascinated by this book. I heard your interview with Sabby Sabs, and she was nice enough to give me the information in order to make contact with you. How are you doing this morning? I think I've already asked you that. I would ask you again just as a...
It's good. I'm still good. I'm still good.
All right.
Can't take it for granted, right?
Yeah, I know, right? I want to show you a clip by Richard Nixon, and I want to get your take on it.
Okay.
And I'm showing you a clip for Nixon because Nixon and Kennedy battled in an election.
All right.
And I want to kind of give context to the way American presidents dealt with Zionism back then at the time, as opposed to the way you deal with it now. And there seems to be a radical difference. I want to get your take on whether or not you think there's a radical difference or whether I'm just misperceiving this. This is Nixon talking about it. I've shown this to the audience before you got here. I'm going to show it one more time just for you as a basis of reference.
it isn't a question of whether I felt it. The fact is that American Jews support Israel, and I understood that. And the fact is that every Jewish prime minister that I have known has enlisted in the political process on American presidents. That's understandable. I don't object to it. Now, a president must not go along with it on occasion, because let me explain something about what is called the Jewish lobby in this country. In the first place, Jews, understandably, in the United States, because of what happened in World War II, because of the Holocaust, are going to put first priority on the survival of Israel. Now, as good Americans as they are, they believe that America's survival and security is directly related to Israel's. In other words, their belief is that being for Israel first means that does not mean you're putting America second, because they think it goes together. An American president, however, has to approach it in a different way, in my opinion. He's got always to think first of what is best for America. And that's true whether it has to do with the Israelis or whether it has to do with the Irish or the Germans or what have you, or the Poles, etc. Usually what is best for America is also best for Israel and vice versa. But on occasions, for example, an American president must make a decision that does not, in effect, give the Israelis a blank check. And
Do you think that's true today? Meaning what
Absolutely.
Nixon is saying here.
Yeah, I mean,
No, what I mean is, do you think the American
absolutely.
presidents?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's Israel first for all these presidents lately. It's interesting to see Richard Nixon, who a lot of people speak ill of, being such an intelligent, well-balanced guy. But the point is really clear. We're Americans. It's America first. If you're putting another country first, maybe you need to move to that country. I mean, in all fairness. So yeah, no, it's been a long time since we had presidents that were independent.
Yeah, that is clear, concise. He's articulate. He makes the point of, hey, we're Americans. We got to go to America first. The JFK files the book is documentary evidence of JFK and RFK effectively putting America first. Meaning, is that just a point of view that American presidents had back then, that they've evolved into whatever the hell they are today? Like, is that a common point of view of Americans back in the 60s?
Well, so Israel didn't even exist until 1948. So there wasn't much opportunity for other presidents, obviously. However, it was illegal to send arms to the Zionists during the British Mandate. It was a crime. So that was U.S. law pre-1948. Roosevelt, passed away. Truman had to be pushed into accepting Israel. It wasn't automatic. And then we had Eisenhower, and I'm not sure. Well, Eisenhower was kind of tough. The Israelis attacked Egypt when Egypt took back the canal. Yeah, and he didn't go along with it. He was not. They wanted. It's a long story, but basically, the French and English put a canal through Egypt and said, "Hey, we own this." And one of the leaders of Egypt said in the 50s, said, "You know what? Maybe this is our country." And he nationalized it. Now it's interesting. Who attacked Egypt militarily first? It was Israel. So Israel was acting like the attack dog, as it often does, right? And then what they did was, this is important history. Then what they did was England and France said, "Oh, we need to go in there to separate the two factions so they don't kill each other," right? So Israel kind of opened the door. So, but even then, Eisenhower said, "I'm not getting involved in this." All right, and then we had John F. Kennedy, and people that read my book will see that Kennedy was not against Israel. He was respectful, as he was to all countries, but he was very interested in the independence and the prosperity of the entire world, including the Arab-speaking world. And he saw no reason to give Israel some kind of special treatment. His problem with Israel was they were developing a nuclear weapons program. And his other problem was they were evading the foreign lobbying laws. And the laws are very simple. And Nixon kind of referred to it. He said, look, if you're, outer Slavonia and you want to lobby in the United States, okay, we get it. We get it. And outer Slavonians / Americans may want to go along with it. Okay, we get it. No problem. But you got to register. If you're a foreign lobbyist, you can't just be roaming around the United States giving out bags of money to random people. We need to know who you are, where your money is coming from, and who you're paying. And the Israelis did not want to go along with that.
Right.
And John F. Kennedy put Robert F. Kennedy on that job. Hey, could I talk about something related to this that's on my mind? So, we've got this whole, I just watched this program yesterday, and we've got this whole world of assassination scholars. And it's a whole world. It's like a little universe, and they write books and they have conferences and they appear on podcasts. And I got to tell you, none of them are talking about this aspect of John F. Kennedy. None of them. And it's really, really strange to me. And one of the things I get into the book is that, they always say the CIA and the mob, they got together and they planned to kill Kennedy. They never mention that the most powerful person in the CIA at the time the Kennedys were killed was a guy named James Jesus Angleton. His mom was Mexican. It's Jesus, but in America, they call it
right.
That's why he's got that unusual name. But there's a lot of guys in the Latin American world who are named Jesus. So the most powerful man, and his name is hardly ever mentioned. He was head of counterintelligence for 20 years. He outlasted 5 different CIA heads. Okay, and he was an ardent Zionist. So much so that there are 2 memorials built to him in Israel. Okay, that was the leading man in the CIA at the time of those killings. Who was the leading man in organized crime at the time of those killings? They often talking about the Italians. I'm half Italian, right? So they're always talking about Carlos Marcello and Trafficante, and they're always throwing these Italian names around. The leader of organized crime was a guy named Meyer Lansky. Okay. And he is the man who literally put the organized in organized crime. He got together with all the guys and said, look, we're all shooting each other, killing each other, cutting in each other's territory. It doesn't make sense. Let's divide everything up and run it rationally. That was Meyer Lansky. He was also the banker. They call him the accountant to the mob. They call him the banker to the mob. What he really was the fence and the ultimate money launderer. So all these other guys are running around robbing, stealing, killing, dealing drugs. Well, that money had to be laundered. He was the man that laundered it. So he was also the man that did the deal with the CIA way back in the 40s during World War II. So he knew the CIA inside and out. He was an ardent Zionist. He was shipping weapons to Israel when it was illegal to do. He was committing a crime. So everyone's happy to say the CIA was involved. No one has a problem with that anymore. Everybody's happy to say that organized crime was involved. No problem there. Nobody wants to point out the historical fact. And by the way, I'm talking facts here. We don't need secret files. We don't need a 20-year investigation. We know who the top man in the CIA was at that time, James Jesus Angleton. He was also obviously involved in the cover-up, which I talk about in the book. So much so that when the head of the Mexico City station chief in Mexico City, the retired one, died, he personally got on a plane and flew all the way to Mexico City to badger his wife to be able to clean out his library, his safe, and every piece of paper he had in his house. Wow. By the way, Mexico City and the assassination are very connected. That's how into the cover-up he was personally. Okay, so we know he was involved in the cover-up. He also, and a lot of people don't know this, but it's fact now. CIA was reading Lee Harvey Oswald's mail before the assassination, and it was Angleton who was assigning that job because that was his job, counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. Now, a little fact came out. It's in the files. It came out about 4 or 5 years ago. They finally revealed the name of the guy that was reading those letters. Now, the first question, why did they need to keep that secret for over 50 years? Right. Because he was an Israeli intelligence officer who was affiliated with the CIA. He was a guy posing as an international, trade lawyer. He was based in Tel Aviv, and that gave him the ability to fly back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between Israel It's a cover, right? A cover. He was also the man that James Jesus Angleton tasked with going to the hearings, the Warren hearings, specifically when the wife of the assassin, I forget her name, but yeah, when she was being interrogated, Angleton sent that man to sit in the room and listen to what was going on. So anyway, Angleton deep into it. There's no question about it. But what the other guy, again, the mob guy, Zionist to the bone.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go, you can read all these conspiracy books. You can go to all these conferences. You can listen to a million podcasts. They will never ever mention this fact. I also have to point out, if I may.
No, please.
We had a movie, JFK, by Oliver Stone. I think Oliver Stone is one of the great American heroes of all time, but not for the JFK movie. He's a hero because he made a movie called Born on the 4th of July, and every American should see it. It's the most powerful anti-war movie ever made. So he accumulated a lot of capital, a lot of political connections in Hollywood over many years to spend it to make that movie, because it's anti-war. It tells you how horrible war is, and it also shows you how our country treats our veterans. If people haven't seen this movie, and you know what? No one talks about this movie anymore. Watch this movie. It'll blow your mind. So anyway, I love Oliver Stone for that reason. However, he's wandering in the weeds when it comes to JFK. And I just saw him on an interview yesterday, and I love him. I don't want to criticize him. But here's a fact of life. The guy that financed JFK, an Israeli and a Zionist. And he has two particular factors to his life story. Number one, he is one of the reasons that Bibi Netanyahu is in jail. Not in jail. He's not in jail yet. He should be, but in court. And he actually was involved corrupting Bibi Netanyahu. And the prosecution in Israel said, look, if you'll testify against Netanyahu, we won't charge you. So that fellow, and I have his name written down somewhere, but anybody can look it up. Who's the guy that produced and funded JFK? It's very easy to find his name. No. So he's like this with Netanyahu. He was also involved in helping Israel get the technology to build the atom bomb. Oh, okay. He's the guy that paid for the JFK movie. So we're not going to hear anything about Zionists in the JFK movie.
Now, just to be clear, you're making the connection between, because you're making the connection between. Well, yeah, it is, right, and I'm trying to reconcile two things. Because there's often questions of, okay, well, why did an American president get killed? And that's always one of the things that is looming. And people say, well, it's because he was trying to make association with the Russians. Some people say, well, they killed him because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We got so close to being blown up, and it's Kennedy's fault, even though he was able to get us out of it. In your case, your point is the Israelis, the Zionists, he didn't want them to have a nuke. Yeah. And they were doing everything in their power to prevent him from being able to put presidential power on preventing them from getting that nuclear weapon.
That's right. So the way I look at it is it's been presented as CIA organized crime. Fair enough. But they're missing the third party. And that's the Zionists, who happen to have leading roles in the CIA, and they happen to have leading roles in organized crime. Now, I'm not saying that Israel is the sole or the Zionists, and I distinguish between Israel and Zionists. I hope someday Israel becomes sane again, or if it ever was. I don't know. It's certainly not sane now. But I always say the Zionists, and I never say the Jews, because there's a billion Jews that are against what Israel's doing. So to call this a Jewish issue is nuts. Judaism, 3,500 years old. Zionism, 120 years old. Judaism, a religion that values the sacred. Zionism, a political ideology that's based on homicide and larceny. So they're not connected. They're not connected. So all these guys were talking. You know, the mob was talking with the CIA. The CIA was talking with the Israelis. The Israeli government. They were all interconnected. So they had multiple reasons to kill Kennedy. One was his brother was going after organized crime hard. Mm-hmm. That's a good reason for organized crime to get rid of him. On the Cuban side, and people never say this, and God bless the Cubans. I love Cuban people. I've been to Cuba many times, But a lot of the people that had to leave Cuba when Castro came in were stone cold killer gangsters. That's why they had to leave, because they were working for the mob. People don't realize that the mob ran Cuba under Batista. It was their baby. And who was running it? Lansky. Meyer Lansky, Cuba was his dream. So he was really pissed off when he got thrown out. Okay, so there's another reason. And there were a lot of Cubans running around that wanted to kill Kennedy too. Who else? The oilmen, the Texas oilmen wanted to kill Kennedy because he was going to get rid of the oil depreciation allowance or depletion allowance, which basically gave them, it was like an accounting trick that let them keep way more profits than they should have. And Kennedy was talking about taking it away. And the CIA, of course, hated Kennedy because he actually talked about dissolving the CIA. Something, by the way, his father talked about as well. This was a family thing, right? And then, of course, we have the Zionists. They wanted their atom bomb. Kennedy was absolutely vehemently opposed to it. He even told them, look, if you don't let us into your research facility, like pretty much now, there's a good chance we're going to pull our support for you, right? Wow. And then the second important, and by the way, we got to think about Kennedy. He was trying to pull back nuclear weapons all over the world. He pushed through the testing ban. He got Russia to agree to do, and all the other countries to agree to do no more open air testing. They were blowing up bombs all over the place. They were throwing nuclear waste all over the world, and he got them to stop. His next goal was to put a moratorium on new weapons, and his final goal was to start dismantling them. So this nuclear weapon thing was a big deal to him. He was not going to let it go. It was also a big deal to the Zionists. They wanted nuclear weapons, and they have them, by the way. Yeah. They wanted them, and they considered it a issue of their survival. So the mob looked at Kennedy and said, "This is a survival issue for us because he's taking us out." The CIA looked at him and said, "This is a survival issue because he's going to dissolve us." And the Zionists said, "This is a survival issue because he's going to interfere with our nuclear weapons program." And they all knew each other, as I mentioned earlier. The Zionists and the CIA and the mob all knew each other. So very easy for them to get together and pull this off. And that's how. And so that's the third leg. You know, a stool, right? You can't sit down on a stool with two legs. You fall over. You need at least three legs. And those are the three legs. And here's what I want to say. They're keeping the fact out of the public consciousness that the third leg of the stool was the Zionists, not just the Israelis, but Zionist people in the CIA at the highest levels and Zionist people in organized crime at the highest levels. Why are they doing this? I mean, honestly, you're like one of the few people that will let me talk about this. Well, you and Sabby.
I want to know. Yeah. I mean, you wrote the book. You have the documentation in the book. I want to know.
Yeah. But a lot of people don't. I'm going to tell you, a lot of people don't want to know. I put this book in many, many people's hands, and they're happy to have the, I call it the Punch and Judy. You know, the Punch and Judy show, you have the two puppets fighting each other. So it's like where assassination research is stuck, and here it is 60 plus years later, is here. Oswald did it. Oswald didn't do it. Boom, 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 boom. They get on podcasts and they fight over it for hours. Well, think about this. If I'm going to invade a country and I'm sending a bunch of different guys to pull the triggers, right? Who's the important person there? It's the guy that's giving the orders and the guy that's organizing everything and putting it all together. It doesn't matter who pulled the trigger in Dallas. And clearly, it obviously wasn't Oswald. And get a bolt rifle, guys, and see what you got to open the bolt. You got to pull it back. You got to put the bullet in. You got to close the bolt. You got to shove it in. You got to find the trigger with your pick. You got to launch. That takes a lot of time. You can't do that. Bang, bang, bang. Oswald didn't do it. End of story. We don't need 1,000 more podcasts and books to go into it.
Yeah, I don't believe in the magic bullet thing. I mean, they're expecting us to believe that Oswald, way out, at the repository, was able to get off multiple shots from the bolt action and bring the gun back, aim it, and do it multiple times.
You can't do it.
And it's like, okay, well, how do you know there wasn't another? There had to be another shooter, right? Even the magic bullet thing makes the fact that we call it the magic bullet should kind of give a hint that it's somebody else, right?
See, and you have to understand. So here's the thing. going back to James Jesus Singleton, head of counterintelligence. What is counterintelligence? Counterintelligence is to make sure the other guys aren't spying on us, and then also to spy on them. But it's also to create covers for every other operation that's going on at the CIA. And the way they do it is like a hall full of mirrors. If you ever remember the old carnivals and stuff, and you walk in and there's a mirror, and some things look big, some things look small, and you're all disoriented. That's what the magic bullet is. That's what the endless discussion about Lee Harvey Oswald is. David Ferry, George Morenscheidt, all we know who shined the shoes of Jack Ruby the day before he shot Oswald. But nobody will talk about the fact that the guys at the head of the CIA and organized crime were Zionists and had a reason to take Kennedy out for that reason, in addition to all the other reasons they had.
I think the stove is too hot to touch.
It must be.
Yeah.
It must be.
I mean, because they can't make the cognitive leap that Israel works for its own interests, or let's say Zionists have this radical devotion to another country, and from their point of view, well, that's racist or that's anti-Semitic to point out. It's like, well, is it true? I mean, I can look at what Israel is doing now. I can see the level of the amount of money that comes in. $100 million were spent in our political campaigns. I think it was like last year. That is an astonishing sum of money, right? And it's like, okay, well, what does that money compel? What are you giving that much money for? We are obviously giving it for devotion for political capital that you're using. So it's not shocking to me. I mean, killing a president is a shocking thing in general, right? It's a mind-blowing thing to happen. It is difficult for some people to make that leap of saying you had a fifth column in your government that did this because they wanted to get nuclear weapons, or you had these other elements in your government that did this because they hated him for doing something else. It's a big ask, I think, for them to kind of take on. And so they recoil the moment that you point that out, even though it could very well be true.
But here's the thing: they're willing to say the CIA did it. Nobody.
Which is another cognitive leap, a fifth column, right?
Yeah, but they won't. But notice they won't ever mention the third player, which were the Zionists.
Yeah,
and I think the reason for that is, being I am absolutely, as you know from my bio, I am not a professional assassination scholar, right? But there are people that are. That's their whole living, and I have a feeling. If you're, and it's, everyone's got to make a living. And I have a feeling if you're in that world and you start talking about what I'm talking about, your books won't be published anymore, and you're not going to any more you're not speaking at any more conferences. So I think that, and so now if you think about how this is structured, when a typical podcaster wants to have an expert, who do they call? Well, they call the assassination community. Yeah. So if you want to control the narrative, just control those guys. And how do you control them? One, you could pay them off, which is possible. But the other thing you could do is just make it really clear. Every time you mention Israel, you're going to be in trouble. So maybe you shouldn't just skate that. Don't get too close to it. This podcast that I watched yesterday, and I won't mention the name because I respect the person that did it. I'm hoping the educator, the Stone and his research colleague mentioned James Jesus Singleton. They actually mentioned him, but then they drifted off really fast. And it's like, can't we say, oh, by the way, another little thing, James Jesus Singleton was head of the Israel desk at the CIA. That is a very weird arrangement, because usually you have one job. You're like head of counterintelligence. You're not head of counterintelligence and head of the Israel desk. Now, what is it? So what is the Israel desk? You got to think about it. Central intelligence. That its original job was to collate all the intelligence from around the world. So there are different desks. Here's the Botswana desk. Here's the Chile desk. Here's the Burma desk, or the Thailand desk. Here's the Israel desk. That means all the information coming to the CIA about Israel gets directed to the Israel desk. And the Israel desk is the choke point. They're the ones that distribute that information to the rest of the government. So James Jesus Singleton was head of the Israel desk while simultaneously being head of counterintelligence for 20 years.
Wow.
Think about that.
When they researched this, like when they were doing hearings, just never.
And let me tell you another thing, right? Some people have heard of Frank Church.
Yeah.
Frank Church, that investigation that happened around the 70s, right? amazing. That's when they actually revealed the connection between the mob and the CIA. It had never really been revealed in a public, in a formal setting before. There were always theories about it, right? So that was the first time that came out. So Frank Church, who's he? Senator from Idaho. Great, cool. Did they ask to talk to James Jesus Angleton? No. Did they ask? No, oh no, nobody talks to James. Did they ask to talk to Meyer Lansky? Because they made all the Italian gangsters come in. They didn't ask Meyer Lansky to come in. Now, so what's this with this guy in Idaho? Well, who paid? And he was a great man. He did good things. Who paid for his campaigns? He was because he was progressive. He was very popular in, drum roll please, Hollywood. And a lot of his money that made him a senator in Idaho did not come from Idaho. It came from Hollywood. And Hollywood has a lot of Zionists, as we know, and a lot of organized crime Zionists too. You know, Lou Wasserman, the head of MCA, you know, came from the Chicago mob. He was sent out. You know, the mob's they're always good. They're serious business people. Wherever there's money, they're looking around, right? Yeah. And they saw Hollywood booming, and they sent one of their guys out there to do the do. And one of the things he did was enroll a young actor named Ronald Reagan. And if you ever read the book Dark Victory, you will find that the mob had Reagan wired from a very early age. But in any event, so there's a lot of Zionist organized crime, and it's hard to, organized crime and Zionism, they're not separate things. So there's a lot of organized crime money and Zionist money in Hollywood, and that money, I'm guessing, when they say the money came from Hollywood, I'm pretty sure that's who it came from. And when he put on his hearings, he skirted Israel. He didn't want to talk about Israel, and he didn't talk about Israel. And the other thing too is these guys are figureheads, and the people that do the real work are their staff, and they advise the senator, hey, senator, we should go in this direction. We should go in that direction. It's not hard to infiltrate a senator's staff. It happens all the time.
So when Kennedy was murdered, the bomb at that point went there was no eyes on that anymore.
Right.
That was irrelevant.
Right.
In which case Israel got the bomb. The U.S. presidents at that point paid no mind to it. This was a project of Kennedy's, not the priority of the next president. That is amazing.
Well, here's another interesting thing. Lyndon, there are Christian Zionists.
Yeah.
And apparently there are more Christian Zionists than there are people in Israel. I mean, it's a huge group of people. He had family members, including an aunt that he was very close to, who were ardent Christian Zionists. He had a lot of people in his business circle and political circle in Texas who were ardent Zionists. He was very, very close to a couple, and especially the woman, who were terrorists during the British Mandate. Mm-hmm. Like, these were Zionist terrorists, like shot. I mean, here's the other crazy thing, right? What do you think the Zionists were doing when the British were running Palestine? Well, we all know they bombed the King David Hotel. That's kind of famous. A lot of people have heard about that. But there were scores of terrorist acts carried out by the Zionists, including the murder of policemen, the murder of British troops, the murder of a major British political figure in Cairo, the blowing up of bridges, the blowing up of railroads. Who brought terrorism to the Middle East? There were no terror bombings going on in Egypt or Morocco or Iraq. That whole way of doing warfare, because it's, by the way, Islam is when it's practiced correctly, is a very humanistic, devout religion. Like they don't justify the murder of women and children ever. Like there's no justification for it.
Right.
So that kind of thing did not go on in pre-Zionist Middle East. It was the Zionists that brought terrorism, and the innocent people get killed. A lot of innocent people were killed when that hotel was blown up. By the way, they blew up the hotel because that was the headquarters of the British Mandate. That's where the office was, and there were And here's the amazing thing. So shows you how cold-blooded these people were. There were Jewish employees working for the British Mandate.
Oh, they
They
didn't
were
care.
killed in that bombing too. And I've seen footage from the families that are still alive, remembering they never got an apology. They never got anything. They never got compensation. They lost their father. They lost their husband, murdered by Zionists.
Very similar.
Jews murdered by Zionists.
Well,
And no, yeah,
Hannibal directive.
yeah,
I mean,
well,
they still have policy on some level.
exactly.
Wow. This is fascinating. You're absolutely, this is fascinating. I mean, because a lot of this stuff is not, like you said, people will say, well, the CIA killed Kennedy. And they were
Yeah.
okay with that, even if they don't know the details. They said that has been something that has been seeded in the culture where we kind of accept, which is mind blowing to accept, right?
Yeah.
Like one of your intelligence agencies carried out the assassination of the president. Okay, that's a mind blowing thing. That's not trivial. And then when you dig into it and you find other linkages that bring it together, where it starts to make more sense about, okay, why would the president have been killed? Who would be involved? Oh, that gets fascinating. That's why I wanted you on. And that's why I'm so glad you came on.
You know how they handle it? They call it rogue elements of the CIA, and then it's okay.
Yeah, but in your case, that's not a rogue element of the CIA.
That's my point. He was the top man. He was nothing rogue about him.
Yeah. Wow. I really appreciate you coming on for this.
Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic breakdown.
You're a rare guy. Most people will not let me talk about this stuff.
I could sit here and just let you just talk. I don't even have to say anything. It is fascinating. And like you said, there's so many linkages. Check out his book, Ken McCarthy. He is an American activist, educator, entrepreneur, and a commercialization pioneer, author, JFK and RFK's battle against the Zion extremists. Yeah, Zionist extremism. With documentary evidence, this is the book, just in case people want to see it and get this book. It's on Amazon. You can download it by Kindle. Just amazing. And by the way, RFK Jr. would say the same thing. The CIA killed my dad.
Yeah, but then he doesn't take
he's a hardcore Zion, like he
doesn't take it the rest of the way.
No, he doesn't. And at this point, he couldn't take it. Like the stuff that he says, he couldn't take it. But Palestinians are the most pampered people on the planet.
I fell out of my chair when I couldn't even believe that I was hearing those words come out of his mouth.
Yeah, it just shocking for him. He runs a political campaign based on, I want to end wars, I want to talk to my neighbors, I want to talk to my enemies, I want to do all of this stuff. And then, but the Palestinians, screw them. It's like, okay, you're contradicting your campaign, right? Just at the very basis of
and his family's values. You know, he's always talking about his uncle, he's always talking about his father. His uncle in particular. I don't want to go, if I'm going too long, let me know. Okay.
No, go for it.
His uncle, John F. Kennedy, very important story. And I'll be brief. When he was a senator from Massachusetts, twice he got on the floor of the Senate and gave long speeches, one about the French in Indochina, and said, we can't support this anymore. This is not good. He also said, about the French, he said, look, because there was a horrible war of oppression, very much like what's going on in Palestine. If you can imagine, numerically even worse. The French were just massacring civilians, destroying their villages, starvation programs, concentration camps. I mean, like a concentration camp is when you take people from where they belong, civilians, and you put them into a barbed wire enclosure. That's a concentration camp. So there were concentration camps in Algeria. And Kennedy, again, was on the floor of the Senate saying, this is bad. We're not helping anybody by supporting France doing this. We got to stop it. So when he was president, de Gaulle finally said, okay, we're done. We're going to pull out of Algeria. They've been there for 150 years. I think they killed literally 1/3 of the population over that time. Jesus. I mean, it was horrible what they did. And what did Kennedy do? The Algerians had their first election. They elected a president. And you can find this on the internet. He held the most lavish reception for a foreign president I've ever seen in my life. Maybe you can find a better one. He had an honor guard from every one of the militaries, and not 3 guys with a flag. We're talking like 20 guys deep. He had 21 gun salute.
Yeah.
it was on the lawn of the White House, the Rose Garden. I've never seen anything so lavish. He was telegraphing to the world. By the way, this happened October 1962. He was dead November 1963. He was telegraphing to the world, and he said this in his speeches. And I have another book called John F. Kennedy, Anti-Imperialist. He said this in his speeches when he was a young man, when there was no profit in it for him. That was the Red Scare time. That was, don't talk bad about our allies. Don't support, insurgents. Just keep quiet. Well, he didn't keep quiet. He spoke out, and it cost him politically. Think about it. He's a senator from Massachusetts. The average guy in Massachusetts, they didn't care about Algeria.
Right?
They didn't care about Indochina, but he cared, and he paid. He was willing to pay a political price. And then when the Algerians were free, at last, they had their first leader in like 140 years since the French came. He honored that man to a degree. I mean, you just can't honor anybody more in the White House. Usually it's like a chair, two chairs. The president's here, the other guy's there. They answer a few questions. No, this was this lavish thing.
He was making a point.
Yeah. So he was not into us being this imperial power. He wanted us to compete, but in a fair and honest way, and he wanted us to lift up the other countries. Now, part of it was practical because then we were at odds with the Soviet Union, and he wanted to show that Americans we're decent people. We want everybody to survive, and we want everybody to thrive. But that's not what the people that ran the CIA or the people that run organized crime or people that run Israel had in mind.
Wow. Ken, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate this. You have no idea. This is fantastic. You check out his book. It's right here one time, just for the audience so they can see it for themselves. JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zion Extremism, the documentary evidence. Ken, thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And great to meet you, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Same here, man. Same here. You be safe, okay?
Thank you. You too.
All right. That was fantastic. I just love the history lesson. It said, bring them back, please. Bring them back. Bring them back. Oh, that is fantastic. That is fantastic. Yeah, the audience is loving it. Yeah, that's fantastic. And nobody ever brings it up. Like it's almost like a hot rail. It's like, oh, we can't touch that rail. It's like, dude, I just want to know what's true. The president was murdered, right? Like this startling event takes place. And you, all things being equal, want to know why. And you get files that effectively kept for like 60 years. But they say, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here at all. We're just keeping the files for 60 years. And it's like, okay, well, what is in those files? Well, you feel the need to keep them for that long. Just amazing. Let's go to the chat for a bit. Jabari, BLC Media, Jamarlt, the CIA and AFRICOM is coming after Burkina Faso. They are they're lying again to overthrow the president of the country. Well, they've threatened him, from my understanding, effectively saying they were going after him. From my understanding, Burkina Faso, Mali, there was one more, Niger, are all working in unison as a group and as a collective. And look, if you notice, many of those other countries that were French colonies are kicking the French out. Also, Chad has just kicked them out. They're effectively saying we're sick of this kind of soft power projection that France is using in these countries, with those three breakaways as being the, let's say, lightning rod for this kind of conversation that's taking place. I know Kofi believes that this is going to be something that takes place over all of Africa, with these countries being, I go with the lightning rod, the focal point of that resistance that came up. He has been very strong leader of that country for the time being that he's taken it over. I'm going to try to get Kofi on. Kofi has been away, so he's in the bush, which is the funniest way to describe it. Slava Ukraine UA, John Scott. All right, John Scott, fair enough to you. If Zelensky doesn't sign a deal, I don't know how long that is going to last. Therefore, now, as Aristovich pointed out, it's 4. It's going to go to 6. At some point, it's going to be 8. As Trump pointed out, they may take it all. It went at the point where the military collapses. So, Slav Ukraine all you want. Reality is reality. You're stuck with it. Get in bed with the U.S. and Europe to try to have a war against Russia or build up to a war. We would have done the same to Mexico, by the way. Just saying. Just like we were willing to do to Cuba. So let's keep going. Wanda USA super sticker. Thank you, Wanda. I appreciate your super sticker. Ken is fantastic. That is a fantastic breakdown. And the book apparently has the documentation to back up exactly what you were saying. The magic bullet thing never made sense to me. A bullet stops him in there and it goes after him. It's like, okay, that makes no sense. But they will sit on TV and argue about it. You will see these experts that would go to the thing and it was like, I can use a bolt action rifle and I can do this. Okay. It's like, what's more likely to be true? A guy was able to be perfect in that moment, which again, the magic bullet thing doesn't really make sense. But okay, the guy was able to be perfect at that distance with bolt action and then get the sight back and then hit fighter off the shots. Or there was somebody else involved. And if indeed it was a fifth column in the US government that did it, that fifth column had people in place that could cover it, which makes more sense, especially if you're pissing people off because of the policies you're effectively going with as a president. It's fascinating. Shout out to Ken for joining me on that one. Oh, we have another one. Kat Ferguson, super sticker. Super sticker. Thank you, Kat. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You guys help support this content. You guys have helped me grow on this show. You all are appreciated for your support, whether that's a like, whether that's a view, whether that's a share, whether that's super sticker, whether that's PayPal, whether that's Patreon, whatever it is. All of those things effectively help this show to grow, and you have my deep appreciation for it. I'm going to end this. We've had a full show. I have a lot of work to do to cut and name these videos. Look, man, it takes me forever to cut these videos. It takes me forever. And you know the hardest part? So in the mornings, I try to curate the show in the mornings, even though the day before I usually have things that I kind of want to talk about, in which case I'm lining up my stuff on Twitter. But usually in the mornings, I'm like, all right, what's the title? Because your title is going to be the thing that's that draws attention. That is the hardest part to do for me on videos, because the title, you could have a fantastic conversation. If the title sucks, nobody's going to watch, which puts you in a pressure cooker of a situation. It's not like Judge Napolitano, where he can say anything. He can be like, Ritter talks about his underwear, and you get like 100,000 views. It's not that. It has to be honest. It has to be curt because it has a certain length. And if you fuck it up, nobody's going to watch. Oh, it's pressure. It's pressure. I hate it. I hate it. And I realize I am bad at titling. And so oftentimes, like, I would do a title because I try to be honest with the title. Just, this is exactly what the video is. And then you hit the thing that gives like kind of advice on what it might be. And they make it like very short. You're like, okay, so I guess I'm bad at those. The AI helps. This is better. All of these guys are great. And I always want to present, I always want the views are payment, if that makes sense. When you get a good guest, you want the guest to be presented in a way where they get views, where you can say, okay, the views compensated for the time that the guest spent on the show. I hate it when it sucks. I don't know. It's pressure. That's all. That's all. Please don't have Iron Ritter. Look, man, he chose to not be on the show. I didn't make that choice. Judge Napolitano is a good show. He is a good show. Just focus on your keywords. Yeah, but that doesn't. I'll give you an example. JFK. What do you name that, right? You can say the Zionists killed the CIA. Okay, but I don't know that, right, as a flat fact. You can name it what his book is called, JFK's Fight Against Zion Extremism. In fact, that's probably the name of it. Okay, that one writes itself. That one writes itself. Fair enough. That one writes itself. Foment dissident, appreciate your work. Oh, thank you, man. I try. What is it? All the guests are cool. All the guests are cool. But like I said, we had a full show today. This is your full-time job. Yes, it is my full-time job. It is. I mean, let's say from 5 a.m. to 7, you're kind of ramping up. You have stuff that you want to talk about. I try to book most of the guests on Saturday because if you're trying to do all of it over the course of the week, it's too much. You're like the time it takes for you to cut videos, the time it takes for you to title, the time it takes for you to make the covers, all that stuff. That stuff takes several hours. So it takes you over the course of a day, especially if you want to get the stuff right. And so you try to book guests, or most of your guests, on like the weekend where you have more time to do the other stuff. I think I have like one guest tomorrow though, so I'm gonna have to see what's out. Also, you don't want to book all of your guests because you don't know what you're really going to talk about. I tried to get Professor Wolf, but he's not going to be available till next week. I also tried to get Colonel Wilkerson, but he's not going to be available until I think week after next. Both are on the calendar. Professor Wolf is going to be here next Friday. He's always a great guest. Shout out to all of the guests for today. I send them a personal thank you. John, Ken, yes, just fantastic. Arno and Daniel Kovalik. It is hard to wrap your head around something worse than what's taking place in Gaza. I know there are things that happen that were worse than Gaza, but Jesus Christ, at a certain point, the depravity is just, it's like, if there is a floor, it's almost negligible as a floor, the suffering at that point. I think, and I'm going to end it on this, I think the thing that's startling to me is, as a world, we accept it. We just watch. Like, there's no mechanism, there's no Leviathan that gets in and says, hey, stop doing that. That's bad. Let's come up with a solution. There's nothing like that. The UN is defunct. They don't matter. The moment that you have superpowers, okay, well, superpowers are what they are. They're calling that for a reason. When they decide to move on something, it is difficult for other superpowers to get involved unless you're talking about a war in a very large sense. And so when the US gets involved, nobody else wants to get involved. They just watch. It's wild. It's like any notion of an international criminal court is worthless the moment that you have superpowers involved. They would go after African dictators, no issue, right? They would go after the guy from Nicaragua, Duterte. Again, no issue, right? It's Nicaragua. George Bush, not so much. You start a war on the premise of a lie, you get a million people killed in the process of that war. You destroy a country, and the criminal court can't bring charges against you. And before you say, well, America is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, shut up. Afghanistan is. When Afghanistan effectively brought up, we are trying to get the US to the criminal court for the crimes it committed in Afghanistan. We passed the law, attack The Hague, where we would effectively attack The Hague for the US or for allies. Like, it's a superpower. You can't do anything about it. And I got to be honest, the one for Russia is nonsense. That shit is just political pressure. And, Ukraine or Russia are not statutes, a part of the Rome Statute. There's that. They did a criminal court thing on something they weren't privy to, meaning they had no jurisdiction over, for him taking kids out of a war zone. That is just warped. And I remember having an argument with this guy, and the guy was like, well, yeah, that's outrageous. So he should have left the kids in the war zone? That's your solution to this? And he's like, oh, I'm not saying that. It sounds like you're saying that. It's fucking outrageous. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Somebody says live long and prosper. Fair enough. You guys are fantastic. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Somebody said they were from Canadian Pepper. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Apparently, I've gotten a few views from being on that show. There is a lot of people who dislike me on that show. Fair enough, I understand it. I have somewhat of an oppositional point of view. Look, here's the thing with me, right? Sometimes people criticize me for saying that I don't know. That's honest. Like, there's shit that you just don't know. Like, there's stuff that you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. How would you know that? You find out 20 years later that there was talks about blah, 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 blah. The stuff that's taking place in the overt, in the shallow, where you could say, okay, it looks like it's this. And if it is this, and you can have an opinion. But it's kind of hard when people are being deceptive on purpose because they don't want to expose whatever they're doing. And on top of being deceptive, you have a country that has a history of effectively lying. And so, you know, you can only postulate based on what you're given or what could be taking place behind the scenes. That's all you got. Anything else is dishonest unless you are in the room. So I accept that criticism. Fair enough. I disagree with it. Well, nothing else to say. You guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow. Please be safe. Have a good one. Jamal Thomas Morning Show 140, signing off.